Why Sophia must take a very difficult decision. My name is Sophia. I am 16 years of age. I was born in Miami and I lived there with my parents. I attended St. Margaret School. After graduating from St. Margaret, I moved to St. Paul High School. When I joined St. Paul High School, a lot of boys approached me. They wanted to date me, but I was not interested in any of them. I became the topic of discussion among the boys in the school. Everybody was giving me different names. Some said I am boastful, while others said I have pride. Others that I did not know said a lot of unpleasant things about me. I was different among all the girls in the school because most girls in the school had a boyfriend in the school. I saw it as something that wasn't acceptable, so I did not engage in it. Days went by and I continued to keep my stand. I knew the best thing was for me to stay outside any relationship in the school, even though I needed someone I could confide in then. A few days before the examination, I heard that everybody in my class planned not to sit close to me in the exam. They said they wanted to use that to send a message to me that if I do not their wish, I would suffer in school. I was laughing as Mary was telling me. She said she told me because she loved my personality and she thinks what I am doing is the best. What I heard from my junior Mary prompted me to read harder than I was doing before. I started reading at night because I wanted to be well prepared for the exam. I had another motivation to do well in my exam. My dad promised to take me to a cinema to watch a movie if I perform very well in my exam. I haven't watched a movie in a cinema before, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to do so. When I got to school on Monday, the head teacher came to the assembly ground and told us that our exam will commence the next Monday. He urged all of us to read very well for the exam. He said at the end of the exam, the best student will be rewarded with the new iPhone 12. When I heard the announcement from the head teacher, I became more motivated than ever. I was using an Android phone then and it was not even a big phone. There were a lot of things that I was not able to do on my phone. My dad decided not to buy another one for me until I graduate from high school. After the announcement, the head teacher told us to go to our classes. As I was walking to my class, I could not take the thought of owning an iPhone 12 off my head. It sounded like the biggest motivation. 2 hours to the end of the school activities, Mr. John came to our class to inform us that he has prepared our timetable. He took his whiteboard marker and started writing. I took one of my notes and I wrote the exam timetable. I was happy with the timetable because 2 of my favorite subjects were slated for the first day. I loved mathematics and English language a lot. Therefore, when I saw that they were my first paper, I became happy and more willing for the exam to start. At exactly 2 p.m., the timekeeper rang the bell for the close of the day. I picked my bag and I rushed home because I was very hungry. When I got home, my mom had already prepared lunch. She told me to take off my school uniform and take a shower before eating. I wanted to eat first before doing any other thing, but I know my mom would not allow me to eat if I do not do what she says. I dropped my bag in my room and I took off my uniform. I entered my bathroom and I took a shower. I changed into another dress before coming out of my room. I rushed to the dining where my food was. I ate the food hurriedly because I was very hungry. When I finished eating, I sat on the couch to relax my brain because I was very tired. My mom sat close to me and she was asking me what happened in school. I told my mom what the head teacher said on the assembly. I asked her if she would allow me to use the iPhone if I win the award for being the overall best student in the school. My mom said I have come of age, so she cannot stop me from using an iPhone if I am awarded as the overall best student in my school. I was very happy, but I needed to confirm with my dad too. I sat patiently on the couch waiting for my dad to return from his office. When my dad returned from his office, I waited for him to take a shower and his lunch. I know it was his tradition to always watch CNN news before going to bed, so I waited on the couch. A few minutes later, my dad came to the sitting room and sat close to me. As soon as he sat, I told him what our head teacher said in school. My dad said it's a welcome development. He said he likes what the school is doing to motivate its students. I told him that the question I have for him is that I want to know if he would allow me to use the iPhone 12 if I am awarded as the best student. My dad said he has no other option than to allow me to use it because if I win, it will be a product of my hard work. I smiled, I appreciated him, and I went straight to my room. As soon as I entered my room, I opened my bag and I brought out my mathematics, an English notebook. I read from the first topic to the last topic that night. I did not sleep until 3:30 a.m. As early as 6:30 a.m., I was awake getting prepared for school. Even though what I was getting myself into was difficult, the packages that will follow if I eventually become the best student were worth it. When I woke up, I did my daily routine, which was to pray, brush my teeth, take my bath, put on my school uniform, and eat my breakfast. After eating my breakfast, I went straight into my dad's car. I opened the door and I sat down while I wait for my dad to join me in the car. After about 5 minutes, my dad entered the car and we drove off. My dad dropped me off at the school gate and he drove off while I made my way into the school. When I entered, students were on the assembly, so I joined them. I was surprised to see the head teacher on the assembly ground. He said the reason he was on the assembly ground was to motivate us to do well in our upcoming exam. He said students that do well will receive valuable gifts from the school. He said students that fail will repeat their classes. After the announcement, the head teacher told us to go to our classes. For more than 2 hours, no teacher came to the class because it was revision week. Most of the teachers have completed their revision, therefore they do not need to come to class. 45 minutes before the break, Miss Williams came to our class. She was the only teacher that hasn't held a revision class with us. When she entered our class, she told all of us to bring out our notebooks. We started revising from the first topic and we ended our revision with the last topic. She urged us to read very well for her exam because it would not come easy. She said the questions she gave us are standard and technical questions that require a lot of reasoning. She left our class when the bell for the break was rung. As soon as I heard the bell, I went straight to the school canteen because I was very hungry. I ate to my satisfaction before returning to class. 2 hours after returning to class, the bell for closing time was rung. I picked my bag and I headed home. When I got home, I did my usual traditions, which were to bathe, eat, rest on the couch and wait for the next day. I did all these till Friday. When I got to home on Friday, I locked myself in my room. I read as if my life depended on the exam. I didn't come out of my room until Sunday when we were going to church. When we got to church, I was just praying for the church service to end so that I can return home. 5 hours later, the church service ended and we headed back home. When we got home, we were all hungry, so I joined Mom in the kitchen while my dad sat on the couch. After 45 minutes, the food was ready. We all went to the dining to eat. As soon as I finished eating, I went back into my room while my mom and dad sat on the couch. I read throughout the night. I read my notebooks from the first page to the last page. At exactly 4 a.m., I lied down on my bed to rest my brain. Deep into my sleep, I heard a knock on my door. I knew it was either my mom or my dad. I asked who was at the door. My mom replied. She told me to get up and start preparing for school. She said if I do not get up, I won't be able to follow my dad because he will soon be on his way to work. I jumped up from my bed and rushed into the bathroom because I didn't want to miss the trip with my dad. I usually find it difficult getting to school using a public bus. At exactly 7 a.m., my mom came back to my door and knocked. This time around, I opened the door immediately. I heard the knock because I was already set. When I opened the door, my mom told me that I should rush down to my dad's car because he was already in the car waiting for me. I didn't wait for her to complete her sentence before I started running to the car. As soon as I entered the car, my dad drove off. We arrived at St. Paul High School at exactly 7:30 a.m. My dad dropped me in front of the school gate like he always does and drove off. I didn't have the opportunity to drop my bag in my class because students were already coming out to the assembly ground after they heard the bell. I dropped my bag with the security men while I moved to the assembly ground. After the morning assembly routine, the head teacher came to address us. He told us the exam was starting that morning and he expects that we should have been prepared. He warned all students to stay away from exam malpractice. He said any student that is caught engaging in exam malpractice will face the school's disciplinary committee. He said facing the school disciplinary committee might lead to outright expulsion. He also warned all students to desist from taking anything to the exam hall that can implicate them. He said all students should check their pockets before going to the exam hall. He said the school management would not tolerate any excuse from any student if he or she is caught with incriminating materials in the exam hall. He also said another thing that is banned from the exam hall is a cell phone. He said any student that is caught with a cell phone in the exam hall will face prosecution. He said it is an act that the school frowns at, so every student should try their possible best to desist from any form of examination malpractice. He showed us a photograph he brought to the assembly ground. The photograph had the picture of students that were expelled from St. Paul School due to examination malpractice. After the head teacher finished his speech, he told us to walk our classes and wait for our teachers. When I got to my class, I opened my notebook and started revising what I read at home. After about 30 minutes, Mr. John came to our class with exam questions. He said all students should move to the exam hall. He told us to leave our books and bags in the class. He said we are only allowed to enter the exam hall with our pens. I opened my bag and I took my pen. I left my bag on my seat and I made my way to the examination hall. We are asked to form a queue in front of the exam hall. Mr. Patrick stood in front of the exam hall and was calling our names one after the other. When he calls the name of any student, he will check the student's identity card and the student's examination clearance before he allows the student to enter the hall. He did that for all students before we were all allowed to settle down for the exam. As soon as he noticed that we were all seated, he started distributing the exam questions. After distributing the exam questions, he took his whiteboard marker and wrote the starting and stopping times on the whiteboard. After writing the start and stop time, he told us to start. He went around the exam hall to check if there was any student that brought any incriminating material while the head teacher was monitoring the exam through the CCTV camera in his office. The exam started at exactly 9 a.m. Therefore, at exactly 11 a.m., we were asked to submit our papers. As soon as I submitted it, I rushed back to my class to revise before we will be called for the next examination. 30 minutes after, we were told to return to the examination hall for the next subject. The same procedure that was carried out for the first exam was carried out for the second exam. We queued and presented our identity card and examination clearance before we were allowed into the examination hall. The second examination began at exactly 11:30 a.m. The examiner gave us 2 hours. When I collected the question pair, I smiled because everything I have been reading throughout the previous week came out in the exam, just as Mr. Patrick did in the first paper. He took his whiteboard marker and wrote the start and stop time as soon as he gave us the examination paper. He told us that everyone will submit at exactly 1:30 a.m. irrespective of whether the person has finished solving the questions or not. He said those that are through before the slated time are allowed to submit. I started solving the questions from the first to the fifth. The exam had 7 questions, but the instruction of the examiner was that we should answer 5 questions. By 12:45 p.m., I was through with all my questions. I took my time to go through the answers one after the other to avoid any mistakes that might arise when the examiner is marking my script. The thought of iPhone 12 and a visit to the cinema would not want me to fail. I checked all questions and my answers and I saw that they were perfect. At exactly 1:15 p.m., I stood up from my seat and submitted my examination paper. As soon as I gave Mr. Patrick my answer booklet, he told me to go outside. I went back to my classroom waiting for other students to submit their papers so that we can be told to go home. At exactly 1:15 p.m., Mr. Patrick told all students to submit. He collected the entire answer booklet. When he came out, he told us to go home and prepare for the next exam on Tuesday. I was already holding my bag in my hand, so I didn't have to go back to the class. I immediately made my way to the school gate. Fortunately, I saw a taxi when I came out of the school gate. The taxi dropped me in front of our house. I gave him his money and I entered our house. Just as I usually do when I come back from school, I went into my room and took my shower. I changed into another outfit and I went to the kitchen to have my lunch. While I was eating, my mom asked me how the examination went. I told her my reading paid off because I saw everything I read in the exam. She was very happy. She told me not to relent. She told me to put more effort so that I can become the best student in my school. After my lunch, I sat on the couch to relax my head. My books were already on my table in my room. I put my alarm at 5 p.m. and I slept off on the couch. At exactly 5 p.m., the alarm started ringing. As soon as I heard the alarm, I woke up and I went into my room. I opened it and started reading for the next exam. I read until 1 a.m. before I retired to my bed. I woke up as early as exactly 6 a.m. and I went to the bathroom to take my bath. After taking my bath, I put on my uniform and I came to the sitting room to wait for my dad. When my dad came to the sitting room, he was surprised to me in the room already dressed. We all took breakfast and we went into his car. At exactly 7 a.m., we arrived at my school. My dad dropped me off and he went on his way while I made my way to my class. At exactly 7:30 a.m., we were called to the assembly ground. The head teacher reminded us of all the rules and regulations involving the examination. He told us to continue working harder to achieve a good result. He told us to go straight to the exam hall because the examination will start immediately after the assembly. When he left the assembly ground, we rushed to our classes to drop our bags because we will not be allowed to enter the exam hall with our bags. After dropping my bag, I rushed down to the exam hall. There was no time to revise, but I was confident that I had prepared enough. We queued in front of the exam hall as usual. We are only allowed into the exam hall after Mr. John checked for examination clearance. We started the examination by 8 a.m. and ended at 10 p.m. We were given an hour to prepare for our next examination. I went to my class, picked my bag, and went to a silent place to read because many students were making noise in my class. I was there when I heard that the bell has been rung for the exam. I went to my class to drop my bag and I joined my colleagues in the exam hall. We started the exam at exactly 11 a.m. and it ended at 1 a.m. After Mr. John collected our examination booklet, he told us to go home. I rushed back home to prepare for the next day's examination. That was my routine throughout the examination period. It lasted for 14 days. On the final day of the exam, the head teacher applauded all students. He said we have all done well, but only one student can be awarded the prize of the best student. He told us to go home. He gave us the date when the prize for the best student will be awarded. He said all students must come with their parents on the prize-giving day. On the prize-giving day, I woke up very early and took my bath. I went to my parents' room to wake them up. My parents were very surprised to see me at their door at that time. I told them to get prepared so that we can start going to my school. I was confident that I would be awarded the best student because I read very well during the exam, and I was able to answer all the questions that came my way in the exam. I left my parents' room and went back to my room to put on my clothes because I had already taken my bath. After putting on my cloth, I came to the sitting room to wait for my parents. At exactly 7:30 a.m., my parents came out of their room already dressed. My mom prepared a light breakfast for us. After eating breakfast, we all entered my dad's car and he drove off. We arrived at my school at exactly 8 a.m. The parking lot was filled to the brim with different cars. The hall was filled as students and parents were seated patiently to see which student will go home with the award of the best student. The head teacher made his way to the podium and declared the ceremony open. He appreciated everyone present at the occasion. He said the occasion is to celebrate the student that performed better. He said before the announcement, there are other activities like singing, dancing, and debate competition. After 2 hours, all activities ended and it was time to award the best student. The head teacher said he will call 3 students to the podium. He said the 3 students had the best result. He said only of those 3 will go home with the prize. He said the other 2 will be compensated too. The head teacher told the gathering to help him welcome Mason Williams. She was received with huge cheers as she made her way to the podium. Next was Chris Taylor. He was also welcomed with sounding applause. I became scared when the headmaster mentioned 2 names without mentioning my name. I began to wonder if I would be called. I never lost hope because I knew I did well in my exam. After that, the head teacher said permit me to welcome Sophia White to the podium. I stood up with cheers on my face. My dad and my mom were smiling at me from where they were sitting. I walked to the podium and joined Chris Taylor and Mason Williams who were already standing. The head teacher reminded the gathering that every student on the podium did well in the exam. He said it's just unfortunate that it is only one person that can wear the crown. He said everybody is a winner including those that were not called to the podium. The head teacher announced the 3rd position which was Mason Williams. She collected her prize and she left the podium. It was time to announce the 1st position. I was shaking where I was standing. I kept remembering iPhone 12 and a trip to the cinema. The head teacher said the prize for the best student goes to Sophia. I screamed in excitement. My dad and my mom joined me on the podium to receive my prize. The head teacher brought out a new iPhone 12 and presented it to me. As soon as I collected the iPhone 12, I opened the box and started taking pictures with it. Other teachers presented gifts to me. Mr. John gave me a school bag while another teacher gave me an umbrella. I took photos with my mom and dad. I took photos with the head teacher and other teachers. After the photo session, food was served to all the guests. I ate to my satisfaction. After the meal, my dad told me it was time to go home. I went over to my teachers and gave each one of them a hug. I appreciated them for their investment in me. I told them I wouldn't be the best student if they did not take their time to teach me very well in class. I rushed down to where my dad parked his car. When I got there, my dad was getting ready to move. I entered the car and we drove off. While we were driving, my dad kept appreciating me. He said I have made him proud. He said the joy he felt when he was called to join me on the podium cannot be quantified. He said the last time he felt that happy was when my mother gave birth to me. He urged me not to relent in my studies. He urged me to continue making him proud. At exactly 4 p.m., we arrived home. We were all tired, so we all went into our rooms. I was the first person to wake up the next morning. I sat on the couch waiting for my dad to come out of his room. After about an hour, my dad came out of his room. I greeted him and he responded. He told me to join him in the dining so that we can have breakfast. While we were having breakfast, I reminded my dad of his promise. I said I want to go to the cinema as soon as possible. My dad agreed to take me to the cinema the next day. I woke up very early in the morning because I had some laundry to do. I packed my clothes into the bathroom and I washed them. After I finished my laundry, I took my bath. I checked the time and it was 7 a.m. I knew breakfast would be ready, so I went to the kitchen to eat breakfast. While I was eating, my dad came out of his room. He said we will be going to the cinema by 10 a.m. He said the movie we want to watch will be shown by 11 a.m. After I finished eating my breakfast, I went back to my room and picked up my novel. I read my novel until 8:30 a.m. before I slept off. I set my alarm at 9:30 a.m. before I slept. As soon as the alarm rang at 9:30 a.m., I got up from my bed and dressed up. I hurriedly dressed up and I came out to the sitting room. A few minutes later, my dad came out of his room already dressed and we moved to the car. We left the house at 10 a.m. and we arrived at the cinema at 11:30 a.m. When we got to the cinema, we went to get our tickets. While my father was buying the tickets, he saw his old friend. My dad and his friend hugged each other. When we entered the cinema, My dad sat at the front with his friend while I went to the back seat. A few minutes later, a young man in his mid-20s came to where I was sitting and sat close to me. He asked for my name and I told him my name is Sophia. He told me his name is Michael. He asked about my family background, educational background, and many other things. He looked cute, so I was happy to answer his questions. Some hours into the discussion, it became more intimate. He asked me if I have a boyfriend and I told him I do not. He looked amazed when I said so. He said he does not have a girlfriend too. He said he has been looking at me from where he was sitting. He said he was happy that I did not sit close to my dad because there was no way he would have approached me. He ended his conversation by saying he loves me. He said he wants me to become his girlfriend. I loved him too, but I did not want to say it immediately so that he wouldn't think I am cheap. I gave him my cell phone number. I told him to call me so that we can talk better. After I gave him my phone number, I told him to leave because I noticed that my dad was already looking for me. After the movie, we entered the car and drove off. I couldn't take his thought off me. It was as if I haven't seen a man before. When we got home, I went straight to my room because I was expecting his call. 30 minutes later, Fred called me. We talked about the movies and many other things. He told me he is still waiting for my reply about his proposal. I told him that I needed to ask him a question that I forgot to ask at the cinema. He told me to ask. I asked him about his age. He said he was 26. Fred told me to give him an instant answer to his proposal. I told Fred that I loved him too. He was very happy as I could hear how loud he was screaming on the phone. We talked about many things before I dropped the call. Since I dropped the call, I have been thinking, I love Fred so much, but I am afraid to continue the relationship because of his age. Fred is 10 years older than me. I think the age difference is much. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or your thoughts on this.
Love can be found anywhere. It can be found in weird places and weird circumstances. This is a story that talks about how true love was found in an unusual circumstance. An emergency phone call that was made to solve a very important issue led to a great love story. Daniel is a respected police officer. He does his work diligently. He has received several recognitions from a lot of government agencies for standing firm in trial periods. He has led many successful operations. Daniel joined the police force because of his father. His father was a police officer too, but he retired before Daniel joined the force. Daniel chose to join the police force because of the stories of different operations he heard from his father. During weekends when Daniel's father is at home, he usually tells him about dangerous operations they went. All these stories and the love Daniel had for the United States made him decide to join the United States Police Force. When Daniel graduated from high school, his father was still in service. He usually follows his father to the office once in a while because his father was a senior police officer. From there, he started knowing little things about the police force. He followed his father to the office one Sunday morning. Unfortunately, gunmen attacked their base. The policemen were able to overpower the gunmen, but they lost some officers. Daniel's father was very sad that day because he has just been promoted as the head of that base. When they got home, Daniel's father explained to him about the dangers involved in joining the police. He asked him if he saw the casualty they recorded when the gunmen invaded their base. Daniel replied in the affirmative. He said it happens almost every day. He said policemen die in the course of carrying out their duty every day. He said he was telling him that to know what he wants to get into. 1 year after Daniel graduated from high school, he got admission into Miami College. One day, some gunmen invaded their campus. Daniel joined the security men in overpowering the gunmen. From then on, people began to notice him in college. The head of security in the college personally invited Daniel to the school's security guard. Every Saturday and Sunday, Daniel usually joins the security guard in their training. After 4 years, Daniel graduated from college. As soon as Daniel graduated from college, he joined the police force. Fortunately, his first posting was to his father's base, but unfortunately, his father retired 2 months before he was posted. Daniel was happy that he was able to fulfill his dream of becoming a police officer. He carried out his duties diligently without fear or favor. He was always ready to tackle the enemies of the state. 5 months into Daniel's stay at his base, a beautiful female police officer was transferred to his base. On her arrival, she was brought to Daniel's office for briefing because he is her immediate boss. Because of Mary's hard work, she became Daniel's favorite officer. They did everything together. They went on deadly assignments together. As time passed by, They began to fall in love with each other, but none of them was ready to make the first move. Months went by without any tangible approach from any of them. One day, Daniel went to the gym with his friend Tony. After the gym, Daniel told Tony about Mary. He told him how he cannot stop thinking about Mary. He said he is afraid to share his feelings with Mary because of two things. He said the first is that if Mary accepts to date him, it might impact negatively on their work. He said his love for her can interfere negatively in their job to the extent of giving her preferential treatment over others. He said the second reason is that if Mary does not accept to date him, she might start disrespecting him. She might not give him the respect she used to give him before. Tony told Daniel that love supersedes everything he is thinking about. He said if he likes Mary, he should do the needful before another man snatches her away from him. After listening to Tony's advice, Daniel decided to take the bold step. He called Mary when he got home and asked her if she was free the next day. Mary told Daniel that she will be free the next day. He told her to meet him at the Miami resort the next day. "Do you want me to do anything for you, sir?" Mary asked. "No," Daniel replied. He said there is an important thing he wants to tell her. Mary agreed to meet Daniel at the Miami resort the next day. When she dropped the call, she started thinking about why Daniel wanted to see her. In her mind, she started thinking if Daniel was ready to tell her what she has been craving to hear from him since the day she was posted to his base. On Sunday morning, Mary did her normal cycling exercise. After the exercise, she took breakfast. While she was eating her breakfast, she called Daniel to ask him the time they are to meet. Daniel gave her the honor of choosing the time she felt will be most comfortable for her. Mary said she thinks 12 is better. Daniel said he has no problem with the time she chose. After eating breakfast, Mary went to the bathroom and took a shower. At that time, the time was 8:30 a.m. She felt she had a lot of time because her house is just 30 minutes drive to the Miami resort. Not knowing what to do, Mary put on her television set and started watching a movie she bought. She has been watching the movie for more than a month. She has not been able to complete watching the movie because of her busy schedule at the office. She thought that, since she still has like 2.5 hours before she leaves home, the best thing is for her to continue her movie from where she stopped. She loves the movie so much because the movie details the day-to-day job of a police officer. The movie was recommended to her by one of her colleagues. She watched the movie until 10:30 a.m. When she noticed that the time was 10:30 a.m., she switched off the television and went to the bathroom to take her bath. By 11:30 a.m., she has finished dressing and was ready to hit the road. By 12:05 a.m., she got to the Miami resort. At first, she didn't see Daniel, so she had to call him. When Daniel answered the call, she asked him if he has arrived at the Miami resort. Daniel told her that he has been there for more than 30 minutes because he wanted to be there before her. She told him that he should come and pick her at the front of the resort because she cannot see him. Daniel rushed to the gate to pick Mary. They walked to where Daniel was sitting. Daniel ordered for a bottle of wine while Mary ordered preferred juice. For more than 5 minutes, Daniel did not say anything. He kept thinking if what he was about to do was the best. At some point, he wanted to change his mind, but he kept remembering what Tony told him. He didn't know how he will feel if he sees Mary with another man. Mary sat for 5 minutes and she didn't hear anything from Daniel. She asked him why he said he wanted to see her. She said she was surprised when he told her on phone to meet him at the Miami resort because she knows him as someone who likes staying indoor when he is not at work. Daniel told Mary that he has his reasons for telling her to meet him at the resort. He felt the resort was the best place to say it. He said he has been thinking about what he wants to tell her for months, but he thinks this is the right time for him to say it. He said everybody knows him in office as a disciplined man. He said they know him as someone who does not associate with the female gender at work or home. He said it has been like that since he was young. He said the reason for such is not that he doesn't like women, but since he was a child, he has never met a woman that was diligent as Mary. He said the first day he saw her in his office, he thought she was like other female officers who don't take their job seriously. But his perception changed when they went for an operation in Michigan. He said he was happy with the courage she displayed in the operation. He said besides that, he has been watching her closely at work. He said how she faces her job squarely. He said female police officers like Mary are rare in the police force. He said all these and many more are why he has decided to make the decision he is about to tell her. He said he doesn't know how she will accept what he was about to tell her, but what he is about to tell her is nothing but the truth. What do you want to tell me? Mary asked. Daniel said he wants to tell her that he loves her, and he will want to spend the rest of his life with her. Mary could not utter a word, even though it was what she wanted to hear. She didn't know her immediate boss could be this romantic. The look on Daniel's face showed he meant what he said, so it was not difficult for Mary to make her decision. Moreover, it was something she has been waiting to hear from him. Mary looked at Daniel in his face. She told him that she has been craving to hear what he just told her for months. Mary said she fell in love with Daniel the first day she stepped foot in the base. She said she has been hearing positive reviews about him before she was posted there. She said she heard more of his positive reviews when she entered the base the first day. She said policemen who take their work diligently like Daniel are rare. She urged him to continue to do more for the police force. After they had their rink, Daniel invited Mary to his house. Daniel drove in his car while Mary drove in her car. After 20 minutes of leaving the Miami resort, they arrived at Daniel's house. Daniel showed Mary around his house. He showed her all the awards he has won in the course of his service. He took her to his gym center and his swimming pool. After going round the rows, they finally settled down on the couch. Daniel and Mary continued their conversation. This time, their conversation changed from their work duties to a more intimate one. They talked about sex. Daniel asked Mary if she was comfortable with having sex on the first date. Mary said she doesn't think it is bad. At that point, Daniel knew what Mary said was an invite. He went very close to Mary and kissed her. It was as if Mary was waiting for the kiss. She kissed him and they started kissing passionately. While they were kissing, Daniel's hand was in Mary's boobs. He was fondling it while Mary was using her hand to romance his nipple. The moaning was so loud that they had to put on the television so that neighbors won't hear their moan. After kissing and romancing for some minutes, Daniel carried Mary to his bed. They had sex until they late in the evening. After the sex, Daniel and Mary freshened up. Mary entered her car and left. After that day, their love became stronger. They continued to visit themselves often. Every visit was an avenue to have sex. Mary decided that they should keep their relationship away from their colleagues. Nobody in their office knew about their relationship. After 6 months of dating, Daniel decided to take the bold step. He decided to officially wed Mary. He decided that the first thing to do was to take Mary to his parents. On Friday, he called his parents and told them that he has a surprise package for them. He said they should prepare for him on Sunday. That Sunday morning, he told Mary to meet him at his house. When Mary arrived, they had quick sex like they usually do before they headed to Daniel's parents' house. When they got there, Daniel's parents were surprised to see him with a lady. They didn't know anything about her relationship before that day. He hugged his parents. He told them that the surprise package he has for them is Mary. He told them he and Mary are colleagues at work. He told his parents how he was made her immediate boss on the first day she was posted to his base. He told them how he was always thinking about her but didn't dare to approach her. He told them how Tony acted as the game changer. He told them how he finally summoned the courage to approach Mary after Tony told him to do the needful. He said their relationship has lasted for 6 months and he thinks this is the right time to finally tie the knot with Mary. Daniel's parents were very happy to hear that. They told Daniel that it is their joy to see their grandchild. They urged them to do the planning as fast as possible. They also told Daniel and Mary to carry them along in the planning. Daniel's mom prepared lunch for everyone. They ate to their satisfaction before taking their leave. While they were about to take their leave, Daniel's father asked his son if he has seen Mary's parents. He said he hasn't, but they are planning to do that as soon as possible. Daniel's father said that was not good enough. He said he should see Mary's parents as soon as possible. Daniel joined Mary outside after he listened to his father. Mary was curious to know what kept Daniel back, so she asked him as soon as he joined her. Daniel said his father asked him if they have seen her parents. He said he told his father that they haven't, but they are planning to do so. Daniel said his father urged him to do so as soon as possible. While they were driving home, he told Mary to call her parents on phone. He said she should inform them of their visit. He said she should ask them when they want him to come and see them. Mary put a call through to her dad. She told him that she wants to bring someone to him. She asked him when she should come and see him. Mary's father said he and her mother will be free on Saturday. He said she can come anytime on Saturday. With that, Daniel and Mary decided that they will see Mary's parents on Saturday. Mary slept at Daniel's house that day because she was very tired. They went to work together the next day. Their colleagues were surprised to see Mary coming down from Daniel's car. They decided to make their relationship public. So, they started going to work together. When people began to see them together, they knew something was happening between the two of them. On Saturday morning, Mary and Daniel made their way to Mary's parents' house. 1 hour after they arrived there, they were welcomed by Mary's parents. They were surprised to see Daniel with Mary. They asked their daughter who Daniel is. She narrated to them how she met Daniel. She told them that Daniel is her immediate boss at work. She told her parents how Daniel has been a loving boss. She said he has moved from the level of a boss to the level of fiancé. She told them that Daniel is the person she is dating and they are planning to get married as soon as possible. Mary's father was very happy with what his daughter told him. He welcomed Daniel again. He asked him about work, his parents, and many other things. While Daniel was being queried by Mary's dad, Mary and her mom ran to the kitchen to prepare lunch. After 45 minutes, lunch was ready and they all ate together. After lunch, Mary and Daniel asked to take their leave. They were followed to the car park by Mary's parents. They kept advising them till they left. When they got home, Daniel called his father and informed him about his visit to Mary's parents' house. He told his father that he was accepted very well and they have given him the opportunity to marry their daughter. 1 week after, Daniel and Mary picked a date for their wedding. Their wedding was widely publicized by their friends and colleagues. Everybody was happy for them because of their diligence at work. The wedding day arrived and it was a scene to behold. Guests came from all spheres of life to witness the occasion. Almost every police officer in Miami was at their wedding. They got a lot of gifts from the police high command. The couples got a new car from their boss because they fulfilled certain conditions. The police force had a rule then that if police officers marry each other, they will get a brand new car as a gift. As soon as Daniel collected the car gift, he handed over his old car to one of his friend that does not have a car. After the wedding party, Daniel and Mary returned to their hotel room. The next day after the wedding, they traveled to Paris for their honeymoon. 2 weeks after, they returned to Miami because their holiday was over. The next day, they resumed back at work. Before their resumption, the Miami police have been fighting some deadly armed robbers. The armed robbers had sophisticated weapons. Therefore, the police found it difficult to overpower them. The armed robbers killed a lot of policemen during their cause of operation. As soon as Daniel and Mary resumed at the office, they were drafted to the unit that was saddled with the responsibility of arresting the deadly armed robbers. Daniel and Mary swung to work immediately. They went to the streets of Miami and interrogated people asking them what they know about the deadly armed robbers. After 3 days of interrogation, they finally got a lead. They met a tipster who gave them the hideout of the deadly armed robbers. The tipster told them that the best time to invade the hideout was in the night when they are asleep. With the information they got from the tipster, Daniel and Mary returned to base and assembled a team of armed policemen for the operation. They left the base at exactly 11 a.m. and they got to the hideout at midnight. As soon as they got to the hideout, they forcefully opened the gate and went into the apartment. In the process of opening the gate, the armed robbers were able to detect the police and they engaged them in a heavy shootout. The shootout lasted for more than an hour with casualties from each side. After the shootout, the policemen killed 5 of the robbers and arrested the rest. While the policemen were assembling in front of their car, they noticed that Mary was missing. They went back into the building to search for her. While they were searching for her, they heard a loud noise from one of the rooms in the apartment. The policemen rushed down to the room and found Mary in a pool of blood. She sustained an injury during the shootout. She was rushed to the bus and taken to the hospital. Daniel could not sleep that night. The next morning, he was the first person to arrive at the hospital. When he got there, he was allowed to see Mary, but she could not talk to him. As days went by, Mary's health deteriorated to the extent that she was using oxygen to breathe. Her condition deteriorated to the extent that friends and family were barred from seeing her. Days went by and Mary's condition did not improve. Daniel couldn't concentrate at work. His boss noticed his lack of concentration too. One day he called Daniel into his office and handed him a letter. At first, Daniel thought he has been sacked. When he got home and opened the letter, He realized that he was given 2 weeks' break to deal with the situation at hand. The break gave Daniel more opportunity to be with Mary. He goes to the hospital very early in the morning and leaves very late in the night. Most times, it is the doctors that usually tell him to leave because they don't allow people to sleep with patients at the hospital. On Sunday morning, while Daniel was getting ready to visit Mary at the hospital, he received a painful phone call. While he was putting on his dress, he heard his phone ringing. The number looked strange to him, so he didn't want to answer the phone at first. But when the call did not stop, he decided to answer to know why the person kept calling him. As soon as he answered the call, he heard the voice of Dr. Henry, who was the special doctor that was assigned to treat his wife. Dr. Henry told Daniel that he regrets what he wants to tell him, but there was nothing he could have done to save the situation. Dr. Henry said he is afraid to tell Daniel that Mary is dead. The cell phone fell from Daniel's hand and he began to cry profusely. He cried from morning till night. He locked himself up in his room and was crying. He refused to open the door for anybody that came to see him. 3 days after Mary's death, a police delegation led by the police boss came to visit Daniel. They found his door locked, but they noticed that he was inside. They could hear his cry from where they were standing. The boss called Daniel and told him to open the door, but Daniel refused. The police had no option but to force their way inside the house to prevent Daniel from doing something harmful. When they gained entrance into the house, they met Daniel in a sorrowful state. The house was scattered. The smell of alcohol took over the house. They noticed that Daniel has been drinking since the day he heard of his wife's death. They cleaned the house and arranged everything that Daniel scattered in the house. While they were leaving, they took Daniel with them. Daniel was lodged in a hotel close to the police base. He was given 3 months to recover from his wife's death. After 3 months, Daniel resumed at his duty post. His first day of resumption was emotional. When he entered the office, everyone could not hold back their tears. The tears on everyone's face brought back Mary's memory. Daniel tried to control himself, but he did not know when tears started rolling down his cheeks. After some time, he picked himself up and returned to his duty post. As soon as he resumed, an officer was allocated to him to replace Mary. But this time, a male officer. The officer briefed him on all the cases they had at the moment. Daniel started his day-to-day activities, but he found it very hard to take Mary's thoughts off him. 1 year after, Daniel was in the office when he received an emergency call from a toll-free line. The lady said she witnessed a robbery, and she called to inform the police. Daniel and his team immediately swung into action and apprehended the robbers. They brought the robbers to their base before charging them to court. When Daniel returned to the office the next day, he went through the phone records in search of the number of the lady that called. After some minutes, he was able to get the number. He called the lady and appreciated her for a job well done. He encouraged her to continue giving security agencies relevant information that would lead to the arrest of the people who have decided to terrorize the state. Daniel told the lady that he will like to meet her to show his appreciation because the operation gave him a promotion at work. The lady was so happy to hear about Daniel's promotion. She said she didn't want to accept his invite in the first place, but the good news he told her is what changed her mind. She asked Daniel if he was calling her with his cell phone number, and Daniel replied in the affirmative. She said she will call him back and tell him where and when to meet her. Daniel appreciated the lady for accepting his wife before ending the call. His boss was already at the door to decorate him with his new rank while he was on the phone. When he noticed that Daniel has ended the call, he went into Daniel's office with some other officers to officially decorate Daniel with his new rank. While Daniel was driving home, his phone started ringing. He didn't answer the call because the number looked strange and he didn't want to break the law. The call kept coming in, but Daniel did not answer the call. When Daniel got home, he called the number to know who was calling him. When he called the number, Precious answered the call. Daniel said he doesn't know anybody called Precious. She had to explain herself before Daniel recognized. When Daniel eventually knew that it was the lady that made the emergency call, he pleaded with her. He told her that he did not pick the call because the number looked strange and he was driving home at that time. Precious said she called to inform him of where they will meet. She said Daniel should come to the Fun Garden on Sunday by 1 p.m. if he wants to see her. Daniel obliged. He told Precious that he will be there on Sunday by 1 p.m. Precious said goodbye to Daniel on the phone. She told him to take very good care of himself before ending the call. As soon as Precious ended the call, Daniel went to his bed and slept off. On Sunday morning, Daniel woke up early as he usually does. His first point of call was his gym center. After spending 1 hour in the gym, he returned to his room to rest. After resting for 30 minutes, he went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. After taking breakfast, he returned to the couch to take some rest because he still had time. He set his alarm to 11 a.m. so that he does not sleep off. At exactly 11 a.m., his alarm started ringing. The alarm was so loud that he had to wake up even though he was fast asleep. When he woke up, he went to the bathroom to take his bath. He took his bath, dressed up, and sat back on his couch waiting for 12:30 before he hits the road. At exactly 12:30, he made his way to the fun garden. He called Precious and told her he was already on his way. Precious told him that she has been there waiting for him. Upon hearing that, Daniel started speeding because he doesn't want Precious to get angry even though the time she gave him was not up. At exactly 12:50 a.m., Daniel arrived at the fun garden. He called Precious to come and pick him at the gate. Precious came to the gate to pick him. When they entered the fun garden, they looked for a nice place to sit. Precious started by congratulating Daniel on his promotion at work. After congratulating him, she said she was curious to know why he wanted to see her. Daniel started by telling Precious about Mary. He told her how he met Mary, how they got married, and she died a few days after sustaining gunshot wounds in an operation. He told Precious that he has not been himself since the incident. Precious felt sorry for Daniel. She said she feels what he has been going through, but she wants him to remain strong and resolute. Daniel told Precious that the reason he invited her was that he was looking for someone he can confide in. He said since Mary died, he doesn't have a female friend that he shares his problems with. He told Precious that he wants her to be his friend and if possible his lover. Precious looked at Daniel in the eyes. She didn't know what to say. She felt Daniel's pain. Precious took Daniel's car key and told Daniel to follow her to her house. 10 minutes after, they arrived at Precious's house. They went in and sat down on the couch. Precious knew Daniel was sex-starved, so she wanted to give him sex. As soon as they sat on the couch, her hand started going through Daniel's body. Before you know it, Daniel's clothes were already off. Precious took off her clothes too and walked Daniel to her bedroom. They continued to have sex until late in the evening before Daniel took his leave. After that day, Precious and Daniel became lovers. They did everything together. Daniel was able to find comfort after Mary's death. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or your thoughts on this. My name is Angel. I'm 18 years old. I was born in Michigan. I started my early life in Michigan. I lived with my parent in a decent apartment in Michigan. I attended Michigan High School where I completed my high school education. After I graduated from high school, I moved to Kentucky with my sister. My sister also lived with my parent until she graduated from high school. She moved to Kentucky when she got a job with the Kentucky Postal Services. When I graduated from high school, my sister thought it was wise to join her in Kentucky so that she could help me secure a job. 4 months into my stay with my sister, I got a job at the Kentucky Mall. The Kentucky Mall was one of the biggest malls in the United States of America. A huge number of people come into the mall every day. I was enjoying the job because it allowed me to meet a lot of people. I receive a lot of gifts from strangers who just admire how I do my job. One day while I was at work, a young man in his mid-20s approached me. He asked for my name. I told him my name is Angel. He wanted to continue the conversation but I declined because I was on duty. Our superiors watch what we do at our duty post through the CCTV camera. We were given a rule book before we were employed. The rule book contains the do's and don'ts of the organization. It is stated in the rules that staff that violate any rule will be sacked immediately. One of the rules is that staff are not allowed to hold conversations with customers aside from business conversations. When I noticed that Terry's conversation was about violating the rules and regulations of the organizations, I quickly stopped him and told him to leave. Terry insisted on having my cell phone number before he leaves, so I gave him. I warned him not to call my cell phone during working hours because I will not be able to answer his call. I told him to call me around 6 p.m. if he wants to talk to me. Terry collected my number and left. When Terry left, Mr. Patrick came to me and asked me why I was talking to Terry during business hours. I explained to him that what happened was not my fault. I told him I told Terry to leave when I noticed he was talking about something outside the business. I told Mr. Patrick there was no way I would be able to know that he didn't mean to buy something the first time he approached. Mr. Patrick was satisfied with my explanation. He told me to be careful with male customers so that I do not fall in the wrong hands of the law of the organization. I thanked Mr. Patrick and he left. I continued attending to customers until 6 p.m. When I checked the time and it was 6 p.m., I called the attention of the manager. I told him my time was up. The manager told me to wait for the person that will replace me before I leave. He said he has contacted her and she told him she will be there in 10 minutes. He pleaded with me to wait for her. At exactly 6:10 p.m., Mariah arrived. She knew I wasn't happy because it was her lateness that kept me at the duty post longer than expected. I handed over the goods to her and I went into the accounting room to calculate my sale for the day. At about 6:45 p.m., I finished my calculation. As soon as I finished my calculation, I handed over the money to the manager and I went into the bathroom to change my clothes because I wasn't putting on our company's uniform. After changing into my homeware, I headed out to my house. I was about to board a bus when I heard my phone ringing. I didn't pick the call because I wanted to settle down in the taxi before picking any call. No sooner had I sat down in the taxi than my phone began to ring again. I brought out my phone from my bag to see who was calling me. When I looked at my phone, I noticed that the call was from Terry. I didn't want to pick the call in the first instance because I wouldn't be comfortable talking to him in a taxi. But when he did not stop calling, I eventually picked the call and I told him that I was in a taxi. He asked me why I left work late. I told him the person that was supposed to replace me if I leave did not come early enough, so I had to wait for her. I told him to call me in the next 30 minutes because I would be at home by then. He told me he would do that and I dropped the call. At about 6:30, I arrived home. I was very tired and hungry. I went to my room and take a shower. After taking the shower, I went to the dining to eat lunch. After my lunch, I went back into my room to rest. I wanted to sleep well so that I would be ready for the activities of the next day. My job is very demanding. Most times, I usually stand on my feet from when I resume in the morning until when I close in the evening. No sooner had I lied on my bed than my cell phone started ringing. Without checking the screen of my cell phone, I knew it was Terry. I answered the call and it was Terry. He asked me how my day went and I told him that my day was stressful. I told him that I was about to sleep before his call came through. I told him that I wouldn't have picked his call if I was not the one that told him to call me back in the next 30 minutes. I told him that whenever I get home from work, I take my shower, eat and go to bed because I am always tired. Terry said he knew how demanding my work was because he had a cousin that worked in a mall a few years ago. He said his cousin complained of tiredness whenever he comes from work too. Terry said he would allow me to sleep but I should tell him when I will be off duty so that we can go out and spend some time together. I told him I will be off duty on Sunday. He asked me where he should take me to. I told him that we can meet anywhere he feels is okay. Terry insisted that I choose a place, so I settled for the Kentucky Museum. I told him it has been my dream to visit the museum since I was young. I said I felt this is the opportunity I have to visit the museum for the first time. Terry and I bid each other good night and I dropped the call. As soon as I dropped the call, I covered myself in my duvet and slept off. I woke up in the morning feeling very happy because I would be visiting the museum for the first time. The museum is one place I looked forward to visiting since I was young. None of the high school excursions I went on excited me like this one I was about to go for. While I was at work, I was hoping for Sunday to come. I did everything I had to do at work perfectly to avoid coming to work on Sunday. One of the rules of our organization was that any staff that fails to balance his account on Friday or Saturday will have to come to work on Sunday to balance his or her account. The management does not condone the postponement of the account of the previous week into the new week. On Saturday after the close of work, I rushed down to the account room to do my account. I made sure all my accounts were perfect before I handed over my sale book to the manager. The manager cross-checked my sale book with the money I gave him. He saw that everything was perfect before he allowed me to leave. I got home very late because I stayed longer than expected at the office. I ate first because I was very hungry. After eating, I went into my room and took a shower. After taking shower, I lied down on my bed waiting for the next day. While I was surfing the internet on my phone, Terry's call came through. I answered the call. We talked about many things. He said he couldn't wait to meet me the next day. I said I also can't wait. He noticed that I was feeling sleepy, so he didn't take much of my time. He told me to go and sleep so that I will be healthy for the next day. I bided him goodbye and I dropped the call. Immediately I dropped the call, I covered myself in my duvet and I slept off. I woke up very early the next morning because I had some laundry to do. I packed all my laundry clothes into the bathroom and I began to watch them. I finished my laundry in about an hour. As soon as I finished my laundry, I took my bath immediately. After taking my bath, I slept on my bed waiting for my sister to call me for breakfast. 15 minutes later, I hear a knock on my door. I stood up to check who was at my door. When I opened my door, I met my sister standing in front of my door with tea and her bread in her hands. She said she decided to bring it to my room because she knew I was tired. I thanked my sister and collected the tea from her. I took my tea and returned to my bed. The only thing I was waiting for was Terry's call. I didn't want to call him myself in order not to sound desperate. While I waited for Terry's call, I took one of the novels I bought recently and started reading. 30 minutes later, Terry called. He asked me how my night was and I told him it was fine. He asked me if I have taken breakfast and I told him I took tea and bread. He asked me what time do I want us to meet. I told him I am free throughout the day, so I am fine with any time he chooses. He said he would come and pick me with his car by 11 a.m. He said he doesn't want me to go through any stress. I was speechless as Terry was talking. I could see how caring he was. I told him I will be waiting for him in front of my house before he arrives. My sister was in the sitting room when I was talking to Terry. When I dropped the call, she came to my door and knocked. I was wondering why my sister was at my door again while I stood up to open the door. When I opened the door, I saw her standing at my door. She asked me who I was talking to. I told her the person I was talking to is my friend that I met at my workplace. I told her that he wants to take me to the museum today. She asked me why I didn't tell her about Terry before. I said Terry is just a friend and there is nothing between us. She told me to take care of myself when we go out. I told her that Terry will come and pick me in front of our house, therefore, she will have the opportunity to see him. After talking to my sister, I sat on the couch in anticipation of Terry's arrival. At exactly 11 a.m., I saw Terry's call. When I answered the call, Terry told me that he was in front of our gate. I rushed outside to meet him. When I got outside, Terry was sitting in his car. I told him to come down and say hi to my sister before we leave. I brought Terry into our sitting room and I called my sister. I left Terry and my sister and rushed down into my room to dress. After dressing, I came out and told Terry that we can leave. Terry and I walked to his car and we drove off. 30 minutes later, we arrived at the Kentucky Museum. The museum was filled to the brim as different people from other states came to see how the museum looked like. Terry took me through all the galleries of the museum. At each gallery, a museum worker was stationed there to tell people about the story of the gallery. After going through the galleries in the museum, we went to the restaurant to get some food and drinks. While we were eating, I noticed that Terry could not take his eyes off me. The looks on his eyes suggested that he had something in his mind. I sat patiently waiting for Terry to tell me what was in his mind because I was ready to accept him if he proposes to me. A few minutes into the discussion, Terry began to ask me relationship questions. Terry asked me if I am in a relationship. I told him I am not in any relationship. He asked me why. I told him I wasn't in any relationship because I haven't someone I love. He asked me if I have been in any relationship before. I told him I dated a guy while I was in high school, but it didn't last long. I told him that the guy and I went our separate ways when we graduated from high school. I didn't allow him to finish his question before I asked mine too. I asked him if he is in any relationship. Terry said he is not into any relationship. I asked him why he is not in any relationship and he said his answer correlates with the answer I gave him when he asked me the same question. Terry said he has been searching for the right person but he hasn't gotten one. He said since the day he saw me at the mall, he hasn't stopped thinking about me. He said everything about me just wowed him. He said he wants us to be dating. He said he will be happy if I accept his proposal. I remained speechless for a few seconds. I didn't know what to say. I loved Terry but I didn't want to appear to him as a cheap girl. So I decided to stretch it a little bit. I told Terry that I am afraid of men. I said I don't want to fall in love with a man who will later stop caring for me. I told him how most men run after ladies because of sex. Once they get what they want, they abandon the lady. Terry interjected. He said he is not like that. He said he will take care of me. He said he will love me to the end of time. He said if he didn't love me, he wouldn't have come to me the day he saw me. He said I should try and understand him and give him a chance to be my boyfriend. I looked at Terry in the eyes and it appeared to me like he meant what he was saying. He looked like someone that loved me truly. I told Terry that I heard what he said but he has to give me time to think about it very well. He said he is not in a rush. He said I should take my time to make the best decision that is good for me. After the long discussion, we left the restaurant. There was a concert going on at the museum, so we went there to relax. The invited musicians sang melodious songs that make everybody stand on their feet. I didn't know when Terry and I began to dance. We danced like couples throughout the show. The concert ended at 4:30 p.m. and I told Terry that it was time to go home. I told him that my sister will start calling me if she does not see me by 6 p.m. We went to where Terry's car was parked and we entered the car. At exactly 5 p.m., we arrived at my house. Terry came down from the car while I also came down. I was wondering why he came down. He walked close to me and he hugged me tightly. He whispered in my ear that he loves me. He said I should think about what he told me very well and make a decision that will make him happy. While I was about to enter my gate, he asked me that what time should he be expecting a positive reply from me. I told him that I need about a week to think about it. I said after a week, I will make my decision and I will let him know. I waved him goodbye while he entered his car. I waited for him to drive off before I entered my house. When I entered our house, I met my sister sitting on the couch. She welcomed me and asked me how my day went. I told her how Terry took care of me. I told her about all the places Terry took me to in the museum. I told her how he stood by me in all the places we went to. My sister said she knew he would be a good man when she saw him. I sat close to my sister on the couch and I began to wonder if I should tell her about Terry's proposal. The way she accepted him when I was describing how he took care of me to her gave me the confidence that my sister will not have any problem with me dating Terry. I finally summoned the courage to tell her about Terry's proposal. I went very close to her and I held her arm. I told her all Terry said. I told her how he said he is interested in having an affair with me. She allowed me to finish my speech before she asked me what I told Terry in reply. I told her that I didn't give him an instant reply. I told her that I told Terry that I needed a week to think about it. My sister was very happy with the reply I gave Terry. She said Terry appeared to her like a nice and honest guy. She said he looks to her like someone that can take very good of a woman. She said the ball is in my court. I should do what I think is the best. She said I should date Terry if I think dating him is the best, or I should reject his proposal if I think rejecting his proposal is the best for me. She said she is good with any decision that I take. I hugged my sister and I appreciated her for always being there for me when I need her. I told her I couldn't have come this far without her. I told her I will continue to love her. I waved her goodbye and I entered my room. I was thinking of calling Terry to appreciate him for taking him out before his call came in. When I saw his call, I hurriedly answered the phone. As soon as I answered the call, I told him I was about to call him before his call came through. He said he just wanted to know if I am fine. I told him I am fine. He said he will allow me to rest so that I would be ready for work the next day. He told me to greet my sister and take care of myself. I told him to take care of himself too before I dropped the call. As soon as I dropped the call, I covered myself in my duvet and I slept off. The next morning, I didn't wake up as early as I should. It took the intervention of my sister to get me up from bed. She kept knocking until I woke up. When I opened my eyes, the time was 6:50 a.m. and I have to be at work by 8 a.m. I hurriedly took my bath and put on my uniform. I called a taxi while I was dressing, so the taxi arrived before I finished putting in my dress. I got to work at exactly 7:50 a.m. I went straight to the manager's office to fill the worker's attendance sheet before resuming at my duty post. While I sat down at my duty post, I couldn't take Terry's thoughts off my head. My mind was already attached to him, but I was still having a second thought whether dating Terry was the best for me. At exactly 12 noon, we went for a lunch break. After I ate at the restaurant, I checked on my phone to see if I have a call that I needed to return before I returned to my duty post. When I opened my phone lock, I saw 2 missed calls and 2 text messages on my phone. I checked my phone and I noticed that it was Terry that called and he was the one that sent the text message. I immediately returned his call. I told him I didn't pick his call because I was at my duty post. I told him that the rules and regulations of our organization do not allow us to pick calls when we are on duty. I told him I can only talk to him during lunch break or when I am at home. Terry apologized and promised not to call me during work hours. He said he will only call me when he is sure that I am on lunch break. I told him that my time was up and I have to return to my duty post before I ran afoul of the law. I told him to take of himself. I told him I will call him when I get home. I closed from work at around 7 a.m. like I always do. I was about to board a taxi when I saw Terry's call. I didn't want to answer the call at first, but I later answered it. When I answered the call, I intended to tell Terry to call me back when he gets home, but Terry shocked me. He said I should meet him in front of my workplace. I asked him what he was doing in front of my workplace. He said he left his workplace very early, so he decided to take me home. I rushed down to meet him. I was very happy because I wouldn't go through the stress of waiting for a taxi. When I got there, Terry was in his car waiting. I opened the door and I entered. I asked him why he had to drive a long distance to pick me from work. Terry said he could do anything for me. He said picking me up from work is the least thing he could do to show me that he loves me. While Terry was driving home, we talked about many things. When we were about 2 minutes to my home, Terry told me that he will like me to visit him at his home on Sunday. He said he will be happy if I show up. He convinced me to the extent that I could not decline his invitation. Terry doped me at my house and he drove off. My sister noticed that I arrived home earlier than I used to. She asked me what happened. I told her that I didn't wait for a taxi today. I told her Terry surprised me by showing up at my workplace. I told her how Terry insisted that he was going to drive me home. I told her he didn't allow me to decline because he was already at my office before he called me. My sister couldn't believe it. She kept reminding me what she told me about Terry. She said she was convinced that Terry is a nice guy the first day she saw it. She asked me if I have yielded to his proposal. I told her I haven't, but I will by the weekend because he has invited me to his house. You could see the joy on my sister's face. She was very happy for me. She was happy that I was getting into a serious relationship for the first time. The D-Day came and it was as if I have never seen a man before. I had already called Terry the previous that I would be coming to his house by 11 a.m. I was already up from my bed at around 7 a.m. I woke up that early because I had to do some laundry before I leave. I went to my sister's room to collect her laundry clothes because she was preparing breakfast. I wanted to take the stress off her. I finished the laundry at exactly 9 a.m. I was about to enter the bathroom to take my bath when my sister called me that breakfast is ready. I told her to eat hers while I take my bath. After taking my bath, I went to the kitchen to take my breakfast. My sister asked me what I wanted to do next. I told her I was going to my room to dress up for my outing. My sister said she will follow me to my room. She said she will choose the outfit that I will wear to Terry's house. I didn't have any option other than to allow her. She finally chose an outfit for me and I put it on. I had already called a taxi while I was eating. The taxi man arrived at the exact time I finished dressing. I waved my sister goodbye while I was about to enter the taxi. She waved back at me and she told me to take care of myself. I arrived at Terry's house at exactly 11:10 a.m. He was already waiting for me at his gate because I called him a few minutes before we got to his house. When I alighted from the taxi, Terry kept complimenting my beauty and my outfit. He said I look exactly like an angel that I was named. We both entered his sitting room and I sat on the couch. Terry asked what I wanted but I told him I ate before I left home. Terry was not happy with my response. Because I didn't want him to be sad, I told him to bring me a bottle of wine. Terry brought the wine to where I was sitting and sat close to me. He asked me if I have accepted his proposal. I told him that I have accepted his proposal because I was convinced that he is a nice guy. Upon hearing what I said, Terry hugged me tightly. I felt comfortable in his arms. When Terry noticed how comfortable I was in his arm, he kissed me and I kissed him too. We started kissing passionately on the couch. After kissing for some minutes, Terry carried me into his bedroom. We continued our kissing and romancing on Terry's bed. We romanced each other to the extent that none of us could hold it anymore. Terry and I undressed and we had sex. I experienced what I have never experienced in my lifetime and it was very interesting. After the sex, I entered his bathroom and took a shower with Terry. While we were taking shower, we were still kissing. After taking the shower, I dressed up and Terry drove me home. Since that day, I have not been able to take Terry's thoughts off my head. Our love waxed stronger, which was what prompted me to have a tattoo of Terry on my chest. When I told him that I wanted to have his tattoo on my chest, he was very happy. I told my sister about it too. She said if that is what I want, there is nothing she can do. She said I should just do what is best for me. The next Sunday that I was off duty, Terry took me to the tattoo center himself. He said he wants to be the first person to see how the tattoo. 5 months after I tattooed Terry's name on my chest, Terry was involved in a ghastly car accident somewhere in Miami. Terry and his friends were traveling from Kentucky to Miami when they had that accident. Neither Terry nor his friends survived the car accident. 2 of his friends died on the spot, while Terry died after the 3rd day of the accident in a hospital. Since Terry died, I cannot stop thinking about him. Anytime I look at the tattoo on my chest, I just wish I could see or talk to Terry one more time. Death, they say, is inevitable, but it took away the person I loved most away from me. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do, or please let me have your thought on this.
How I caught Mr. John and Miss Eva on my first day in school. When you meet some people, you begin to think they do not have feelings because of the way they act when they are around the opposite sex. People like that are always found in each organization, society, workplace, or home. I know you have started guessing what I am talking about, but you need to read my entire story to completely know what I am saying. This story is based on what happened in my high school. My name is Sophia. I am a teenager who just entered high school after completing my primary education. When I completed my primary education, I was spoilt of choices on the secondary school to attend because there were many schools close to my locality. After taking my time to inspect all the schools and their facilities, I finally settled for St. Peter's High School. My dad and my mom allowed me to choose the high school I wanted to attend. The same cannot be said of my friends. Most of them had to settle for the schools their parents chose for them. I chose Monday to inspect the schools. I visited all the schools in my locality on Monday, but I had to return to St. Peter's on Friday because it was the school that caught my attention the most during my inspection on Monday. My visit to St. Peter's on Friday cemented my choice. At that point, there was no going back. It was either St. Peter's or nothing. I waited for my father to return from work on Friday so that I can inform him. My father usually returns from work every Friday because his office is far from our house. He leaves home very early on Monday and returns every Friday. When I heard the sound of my father's car on Friday, I ran outside to welcome him like I always do. We both hugged each other and I collected his bag and his shoes. I took his bag and his shoes inside while he was talking to one of our neighbors. I sat on the couch patiently, waiting for when my father will enter the room. As soon as my father entered the room, he went straight to the bathroom to have a bath. After bathing, he came to the kitchen to have his dinner that was already served by my mom. You could see that my father was very hungry from the way he was eating his food. I wanted to engage him in a conversation when he was eating, but I knew I would not get his 100% concentration because of the hunger. I sat patiently on the couch waiting for my father to finish eating his food. After 15 minutes, I noticed that my dad was now satisfied. He was already engaging my mom in a conversation. He and my mom were talking about what happened at his office. He was telling my mom how the week was very stressful. After all, he had to attend to a lot of files because his boss did not show up at the office throughout the week due. My mom also told him that she had a stressful week at the office too. She said her company got submitted and defended a proposal. She said she and one of her colleagues were the ones saddled with the responsibility of defending the proposal. My dad asked her if they have been awarded the project. She said the company is still assessing the performance of all the companies that submitted a proposal. I lied on the couch when I noticed that their conversation was getting longer than expected. All I had in mind was that I will inform him about my choice of school before he goes to bed. After about 2 hours, my dad left the dining and joined me on the couch. I told him how I have been waiting for him for the past 1 hour. He asked me why I was waiting for him and I told him that I have something important to tell him. I noticed that my dad exhibited fear on his face because I am not the type that gets serious when talking to him. I always laugh when I want to talk to him. Therefore, the seriousness that I put on made him exhibit fear. On my own, I deliberately put up a serious face because I didn't want him to reject my choice. I wanted him to see some element of seriousness in me. I told him it was about my school. He asked me if I have finally chosen a high school I will attend when school resumes. I told him that I have found one. He asked me the name of the school and where the school is located. I told him the name of the school is St. Peter's High School. I do not need to tell him the location because he knows the school very well. He usually drives past the school when he is going to work. He asked me why I chose St. Peter's High School instead of other schools in our locality. I told him that I inspected all the schools in our locality one after the other. I said I chose St. Peter's High School because I felt St. Peter's High School is better than the others in terms of infrastructure and many other things. I told him I will be happy if he allows me to go to St. Peter's. My dad was silent for some seconds. I asked him why he was silent. He was just looking at me. After some minutes, my dad finally agreed. He said since St. Peter's High School is my choice, he is good with it. He said he just wants to be sure whether I have chosen the best. I explained to him why I think St. Peter's is the best. I told him how I visited the entire school one after the other before I finally made my decision. My dad said it is good. I got up from where I was sitting and hugged him. My dad said he was going to personally drive me to the school the next Monday to make inquiries about the school. I couldn't contain my joy as I made my way to my room. When I entered my room, I lied down on my bed hoping that the next day will be Monday. I woke up the next morning with a big smile on my face. The smile was so huge that my parents noticed it. My dad asked me why I was so happy. I told him I can't wait to go with him to St. Peter's High School on Monday. I told him how the house has been boring since I started staying at home. A few minutes into the discussion with my dad, my mum called us to the dining. She has prepared tea and bread for us. My dad and I joined my mum in the dining and we continued our discussion. After the meal, we returned to the sitting room to watch a movie. My dad relaxes during the weekends by watching different movies. My dad and I watched movies for more than 5 hours before he stepped out to see his friend. I wanted to follow him because I know how boring the house will be. But my father declined. When my dad left, I returned to my room and continued with the novel I was reading. I read the novel till late in the night. I left my room when my mom called me that dinner has been served. My dad was also back from where he went to. I joined my parents at the dining and we all had dinner together. After the meal, I waved my parents goodnight as they made their way into their room. They waved me goodnight too and they told me not to forget my prayer before I sleep. As soon as I entered my room, I picked up my novel from where I left because I wanted to read it completely before the next day. The next day is Sunday and it's always a busy day for the family because we usually leave home very early for church and we will return very late in the night. I read my novel until around 3 a.m. before I decided to sleep, knowing fully well that the remaining chapters of the novel would not take me more than 20 minutes to complete. At exactly 7 a.m., I heard a knock on my door. I knew it was my parents. They want to wake me up so that I can get ready for church because we usually leave home by 7:30 a.m. I didn't want to leave my bed because I was still feeling sleepy. The sleep I had at the time they came knocking was not more than 4 hours. My parents continued knocking repeatedly when they noticed that I did not leave my bed. When the knocks became unbearable, I had no option but to leave my bed. I stood up from my bed and made my way to the door. When I opened my door, I met my parents standing in front of my door waiting for me to come out. My father asked me why it took so long for me to open the door. I told him I was fast asleep because I slept very late. My father asked me why I slept very late when I knew there was church service the next day. I closed the door and rushed to the bathroom because my parents were already waiting. After taking my bath, I picked up one of my clothes and I rushed outside to meet my parents who were already waiting for me. We prayed in the sitting room and we all made our way to the car. We entered the car and my dad drove off. While driving, my dad told me how important it was for me to sleep early. He said as a teenager, I need 8 hours or more of sleeping time. He said he was not happy with me because I almost made him and my mum late for church. My parents like going to church very early because they are part of the church executives. Church executives are expected to be at the church 30 minutes before the church program starts. I told my father that I was sorry. I told him that I will not repeat such. My father said he has accepted my apology, but he wants to tell me some of the dangers of lack of having proper night rest. I told him that I was listening. My father said there are short-term and long-term dangers of lack of proper sleep. He said the short dangers are a lack of alertness. He said missing 2 hours from the recommended 8 hours can have an impact on the feeling of an individual. He said another short-term danger is excessive sleeping during the daytime. He said if care is not taken, I won't be able to participate in any church activity today. I told him I will make sure I participate in all church programs. I said my lack of sleep will not hinder my performance in church. My father continued with his lecture. He said another short-term danger of lack of proper night rest is that it can lead to road accidents if the individual is the one driving. My father said even if he had taught me how to drive before today, he wouldn't have allowed me to drive the car as soon as he noticed that I did not sleep very well the previous night. My father said all the dangers he listed are short-term dangers. He said others that are more dangerous than the ones he has mentioned. He said we will continue with that when we are heading back home. As soon as we drove into the church, my dad and my mom rushed out of the vehicle to join the church executives meeting which had already started. I went into the church to wait for when church service will commence because church service usually commences after the executive meeting. After about 15 minutes, the executives meeting ended and all the executives made their way into an already filled church. The service started with an opening prayer by the presiding bishop. After that, other church activities followed. I noticed that my father was looking at me when the church service was going on. He wanted to be sure that I was not sleeping. Although I was feeling sleepy, I composed myself because I didn't want my dad to catch me sleeping. I know if he does, I will be the topic of discussion in the house. I was the topic of discussion in the car, but I didn't want my case to extend to the house. I did all my best to participate actively in all the church activities. After about 6 hours, the church program ended, and it was time to go home. When my dad told me that it was time to go home, 2 things came to my mind. The first was that I was happy because I will have the opportunity to sleep when I get home. The second thought was how will I be able to endure the series of the lecture that will come up in the car. My father didn't complete his lecture when we were driving to church in the morning and he promised to continue on our way home. I know my dad never forgets, so I couldn't pray for him to forget. I entered the car thinking how I was going to endure another series of lectures. As soon as I entered, we drove off. My father was silent for a few minutes. At first, I thought he has forgotten what he promised to talk about. No sooner than my mom told my dad that she was tired than he began his lecture again. He called me by my name Mariah. He said we were talking about something when we were driving to church in the morning. I told him that we were talking about the dangers associated with a lack of having proper night rest. I reminded him that he has told me about the short-term dangers. I said it's the long-term dangers that he promised to talk about when we are heading back home. My dad was impressed thinking I enjoyed the morning lecture. He didn't know how boring it sounded to me. He didn't know that I had to listen because there was nothing I could do. He didn't know that if I had an option, I wouldn't step out of the house in the morning not to talk of listening to a very long lecture. The reminder gave him the impression that I enjoyed the lecture, and you could see from his face that he was willing to continue. He started the second phase of the lecture by asking me if I understood everything he said in the morning while we were driving to church. I told him that I understood everything perfectly. Then, he began with the long-term dangers. He said one of the long-term dangers of lacking proper night rest is high blood pressure. He said others are diabetes, heart attack, heart failure or stroke, obesity, depression, impairment in immunity, low sex drive, premature wrinkling and dark circles under the eyes, increase in the stress hormone, and cortisol in the body. He said there are many other dangers, but these are the ones he can tell me for now. He said all these diseases are very difficult to cure. He said if a patient contract all the diseases he mentioned, it is very difficult to treat them completely. He said in most cases, the patient will have to be living with the disease until he or she dies. He asked me if I will want to contact any of these diseases at a young age. I told him that I do not want to. He said if I do not want to contract any of those diseases, I have to be sleeping at least 8 hours every day. He said if I am watching a movie or reading a book, I should drop whatever I am doing when it is time for bed. He said the movie I am watching or the book I am reading won't go anywhere. He said I can continue with my movie or my book when I wake up the next day. At first, I wasn't interested in the lecture, but when I started realizing that what my dad was telling is right, I started paying attention. I appreciated him and I told him I will heed all his advice. My dad said he will end his lecture with some tips on how to sleep better. He said if I want to sleep better, I should follow some of this advice. He said I should treat getting enough sleep as if it is important. He said, for now, I have the opportunity of choosing when to sleep because I do not have a job that can stop me. He said I should schedule an adequate time for sleep. He said another tip is to keep a consistent wake time. He said I should wake up at the same time every day. He said waking up at the same time every day will help you sleep better at night. He said a fixed wake time helps to build a strong desire throughout wakefulness. He said keeping a consistent wake time gradually builds, and shortening it by sleeping will make it harder to fall asleep the next night. He said another very important tip is to put my phones and my novels away as soon as it's time for sleep. He said books and phones keep the mind humming and far from the relaxed state that the body needs before bedtime. He said I should keep my books and my phone far away an hour before my bedtime. I appreciated my dad for the lecture as we made our way into our compound. We all came down from the car and we entered the house. We were all hungry, so my mom rushed into the kitchen while my dad and I sat on the couch. My dad put on the television set because he wanted to watch a football match between Manchester United and Arsenal. My father doesn't miss Arsenal matches because he is a very big fan. He is always in a joyous mood anytime Arsenal wins a match. One of the best times to collect money from my dad is when Arsenal wins a match. There was still 30 minutes before the start of the match, so my dad left the television set and picked up the iron and went to the laundry room to prepare the clothes he will use at work for the week. My dad likes to do his things by himself, so my mom does not bother herself with his office wear. 5 minutes to the commencement of the match, my father left the cloth he was ironing and rushed down to the sitting room. My mom called me to join her in the dining, but he declined. He told my mom to bring his food for him in the sitting room. My dad does not like any disturbance when it's time to watch Arsenal Football Club. My mom had no option but to bring his food to the sitting room. As soon as she served him his food, she went back to her room because she doesn't like football. A few minutes into the match, you could see how uncomfortable my dad was because Manchester United was playing better than Arsenal. He kept shouting at the players even though they could not hear him. 20 minutes into the match, Manchester United scored through Fred. The goal changed my dad's mood. I looked at him and I saw how sad he was. The food my mom served him was still in his front. He hadn't eaten more than 3 or 4 spoons. 45 minutes after, the referee blew the whistle for halftime. I told my dad to eat his food before the commencement of the second half because I know if Arsenal loses after 90 minutes, my dad might not eat his food. He picked up his food and started eating. I went to the fridge to help him get a chilled drink. He ate the food and he took the drink. He slept on the couch waiting for the second half to commence. As soon as the players started making their way into the pitch, my dad stooped up from his sleeping position and sat down. The referee blew the whistle for the commencement of the second half. No sooner than the second half began than my father began to shout at the players. I kept telling him that the people he was shouting at cannot hear what he was saying. 65 minutes into the match, Arsenal equalized through Ben White. My dad jumped for joy as Ben White headed the ball into the net. The match continued and there was no goal until 80 minutes. 88 minutes into the match, Arsenal took the lead through Gabriel. My dad couldn't contain his joy. He was laughing uncontrollably. He told me to get him a bottle of wine from the fridge for celebration. After the 3 minutes of added time, the referee blew his whistle for full time. My dad jumped up that I had to warn him to check the ceiling fan. He opened the wine I brought for him and started drinking. He celebrated the victory until about 9 p.m. when he wanted to go to bed. As soon as I noticed that he was going to bed, I called him and reminded him that the next day is Monday. I told him that he promised to take me to St. Peter's High School to inquire about the school. My dad said he did not forget. He said there was nothing that would make him forget something like that. We waved at each other, and he entered his room while I entered mine. I was already feeling sleepy before I entered, so I lied down on my bed and covered myself with my duvet. In no time, I slept off. At exactly 5:30 a.m., my mom came to my door and knocked. As soon as I heard a knock on my door, I stood up and went to my door. When I opened my door, I saw my mom standing in front of my door. I greeted her and she responded. She said she came to wake me up so that I can prepare myself before my father wakes up. I told her that I was already awake before she came. She left my door and I closed the door. As soon as I closed the door, I took up my shirt and went into my bathroom to take my bath. When I finished taking my bath, I put on the cloth that I had already prepared to wear for the day. After that, I sprayed perfume on my body, and I sat on my bed waiting for my father to come calling. At exactly 6:50 a.m., I heard a knock on my door. I hurriedly stood to open the door. When I opened the door, I saw my father standing at the door already dressed. He told me it was time to leave. He left my door and went straight to his car. He said I should join him. I locked my door and I went to my mom's room to tell her that I was leaving. She followed me to the car and told me to take care of myself. I entered the car and we drove off. At exactly 7:15, we arrived at St. Peter's High School. My father parked his car and we both alighted from his car. When we came down, my dad asked for the head teacher's office. We were directed to the head teacher's office, but she was not on seat. We looked for a seat close to her office and sat down in anticipation of the head teacher's arrival. At exactly 7:45 a.m., the head teacher arrived. When she arrived, she was informed that she had people waiting for her. So she made her way to where we were seated. She greeted us and apologized for coming late. She opened her office and she told us to come inside. When we entered her office, she told us to sit. She gave us water to drink. After we drank the water, she asked us how she could help us. My dad told her that he wants me to join their school when the new session resumes. He told her that his visit to the school is to make an inquiry about the payment and to personally inspect the school himself to see if the facilities they have are up to the required standard. The head teacher said she is happy to have us. She said new students are to pay $1,000 for enrollment. She said the $1,000 will cover the school fee, registration fee, and every other thing I will need for the term. My dad said it was okay. The head teacher told us to follow her so that my dad can inspect the facilities in the school. She took us to the school pitch, the health center, the school hostels, the school library, and all the classes in the school. She introduced all the staff in the school to us. I was very happy as the head teacher was showing my dad the school infrastructure. At the end of the tour, you could see from my dad's face that he was very impressed with what he saw. We returned to the head teacher's office after the tour. My dad made the payment and he left. He drove to his office while I looked for a taxi to take me home. When I got home, my mom had already prepared lunch. I rushed down to the kitchen because I was very hungry. After eating, I explained what went down to my mom. I told her how I was already anticipating resumption. The day of resumption came and I was very happy. I woke up very early because I wanted to join my dad in his car. I took my bath and I wore my cloth. I sat on the bed waiting for my dad to call me. After some minutes, I heard a knock on my door. I stood up and rushed to the door because I knew it was my dad. When I opened the door, I met my dad standing in front of my door. He told me it was time to leave for school. I went to the kitchen to pick the food that my mom prepared for me. I put the food in my bag and I joined my dad in his car. As soon as I entered the car, my dad drove off. We arrived at St. Peter's High School at exactly 8 a.m. I alighted from my dad's car and we waved each other goodbye. When I entered, students were already in their class. I approached the security man for direction. He held my hand and took me to my class. A teacher was already in the class. As soon as I entered, he told me to introduce myself in front of the class. I told the class that my name is Mariah. I told them that I am 13 years. I told them about my family and what prompted me to St. Peter's High School. After introducing myself, the teacher told me his name. He said his name is Mr. John. He told me that he is my class teacher. He said I should come to him if I need any help in my academics. After introducing himself to me, he told me to take my seat. There was no available seat at the front, so I had to make my way to the back seat. Mr. John is our mathematics teacher. He told us that his first lesson is just an introduction to the subject, so he won't stay long in our class. After talking to us for 20 minutes, he left our class and went to his office. I trailed him because I wanted to talk to him. I met him in front of his office talking to a female teacher. I got to know that the name of the teacher is Miss Eva because of her tag. I told Mr. John that I wanted to see him, but he said I should come back in 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, I went back to Mr. John's office. When I got to his office door, I noticed that it was locked. I was about to return to my class when I started hearing a noise in Mr. John's office. I went back to the back of his office where the window is located. I looked through the window and I saw Mr. John and Miss Eva kissing passionately. They were so engulfed in the kissing that they didn't know that someone was looking at them. After kissing for some minutes, Mr. John and Miss Eva both undressed and started romancing passionately. At that point, the noise that was coming out of Mr. John's office became very loud. They kissed and romanced until noon. I noticed that they started undressing when they heard the bell for break time. At that point, they knew all the students will rush out of their classes. They knew they will be caught if they do not stop immediately. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do, or please let me have your thoughts on this. Let me have your thoughts on this. Let me have your thoughts on this.
Thanksgiving Day. Hi, I'm Juliet. Today is Thanksgiving Day, but everybody is moody. We are all seated around the dining table, with no one taking the initiative to eat. Mr. Givenchy, the father of the twins, was asked to give us a top, but he instead went out to receive a mysterious call. Fred's head was on the dining table. Jake was not even seated in the dining. He was watching a drama series in the living room. The twins, Mya and Mia, were in disagreement for the first that I knew about. Nobody seems to be in the Thanksgiving mood. My parents, the Bradley, tried to lighten up the atmosphere, but no one seemed interested, especially when my dad started with his weird jokes. My mom was forced to ask him to keep shut. I was starving from the day's work, but I could not eat as well. I'm scared of the people would say. I work at the grocery store some miles away from home. I am trying to raise some money to help my parents since I will be going to college soon. I drop by at the grocery store every working day to take the afternoon shift. My boss, Mr. Durant, is a lovely old man. He is old enough to be my grandfather, but he owns a store. I don't think he is selling for profit. So far, so good. I have been an honest girl, and Mr. Durant had been a loyal boss. You're a good girl, he said a few months ago. He told me about how his previous employees had stolen his goods and money. That justified why he was reluctant when I came with my application letter. He was blunt. I don't need another employee, he said. I was persuasive because I needed the job, and too. After all, Mr. Durant needed help. I never knew he had diabetes until my second month into the job when I saw him jabbing himself with insulin at the thigh. I got the job at his place because I always rewrite the same application letter and drop it in his mailbox every day. He must have been tired of tearing papers. I should have considered other options, but I knew older adults are the nicest, and they don't like sacking young girls like myself. After a while, I saw a message from Mr. Durant, and he wanted me to come for an interview tomorrow afternoon. I branched at his place after school the following day, and there was no interview per se. Mr. Durant just took me around the store, and he told me where I could find the goods and showed me the restroom and other stuff. The store was quite more extensive than I thought. After introducing me to the store, he gave me a t-shirt. With Durant's Need Store written on it, he gave me an employee's badge with my name already inscribed. Welcome to Durant's place, he said and shook my hands. Everything was faster than I had thought. I was happy I got myself the job. I needed it so much, and now I was sure finances might not be a limiting factor when my admission came. I thanked Mr. Durant. He asked me to call him Joe now. Thank you, Mr. Durant, I replied. He smiled and said, well done. He gave me some laid-down rules. There were no rules, to be candid. He just wanted to make it as official as possible. Some of what he said was that nothing must miss unless they're stolen. I should show up as early as possible and leave by 9 p.m. I was okay with everything he said. Mr. Durant doesn't have to leave the store, and his home is just behind the store. There is this door at the end of the store. I had never entered his place, and I have no reason to because Mr. Durant spends almost the whole day in the store. He only goes into the bath and changes his clothes. After working with Mr. Durant for a month, he awarded me the Employee of the Month. Who else will he give it to? I am the only one that works there. After awarding me, he let me know that I was the only person he had presented with the award. He had never awarded any other person, not once. My diligence convinced him. I was proud of myself. After working at Mr. Durant's, I found out that it wasn't as easy as I had believed it to be. A sales rep in a store at the center of the town is as busy as a bank in the city. I got tired after every day. I wonder how Mr. Durant had been coping. Even with the stress, I have been punctual to date. I gave it all my best because I didn't want to lose the job, and more so, I received tips from the customer. Some made mention that I am pretty faster in responding to them compared with Mr. Durant. You can't blame the older man, and it is normal for him to be slow at that age. I was the best help Mr. Durant could get. From then, he had been rewarding me with the award to date. It is not a big deal, and I had a cartoon full of the awards at home. There is no place to hang them anymore in my room. I am tired of the award now, and I had already lost count. He cooked for himself and me most of the time. I don't take supper at home anymore because I would have eaten at Mr. Durant's until this night, the night of Thanksgiving. Mr. Durant had traveled to his son's place the day before and left me in charge since we were now on holiday. I was reluctant to go home because something had happened, and home wasn't as fun as it was when my mom's younger sister, her husband, and the twins had come to spend the holiday with us. Jake and Fred, my younger brothers, were not the best hosts. Mr. Durant's store is the perfect excuse for me not to go home until late in the night. Once I got home, I said my greetings and straight to my room. That had been the norm until this night.
I am regretting coming home already, and I should have gone to Hope's place.
Hope is my one and only friend. Her place is just 3 houses away from Durrant's Need store. She visited the store often, even before I became Mr. Durrant's employee. Now that I work there, it gives her more reason to come. She does come to help me with sales and keep my company at the same time. The effort potentiates my productivity. For more reason, Mr. Durrant is fond of me. I usually go to her place to do my assignment and science project before heading home. But that wasn't the case tonight. I just wanted to go home and eat. I was so hungry. I would have gotten myself a box of cereals and milk if not for The mom said, today, we eat together like a big family. My dad is not a fan of association, but I don't know what my mom had fed him that night. He was so optimistic about eating together. I knew for sure, and this dinner was to solve the taboo the family just found out. I wasn't of what had happened, and I wanted to eat. Is that hard to ask for? Jake, who was the youngest, is the weird one in the house. I don't understand how he pretended nothing was happening in the house. He wasn't interested in the family dinner, and nobody could convince him into it, not even Dad. Sometimes, I love to be like him, but I am not just capable of doing such things, maybe because I am feminine. That night, I was holding the fork but couldn't touch my pie since Mr. Givenchy had found himself a reason to leave us at the table. I need something to make me leave the table. I was not involved in the mess, and I still wonder why my stomach had to suffer for it. I looked at Jake, whose head was still on the table. The boy would love to disappear. At the same time, I was in the kitchen with Mom when I went to get myself a box of cereals before she stopped me. She told me that Jake had not left him since morning. I was sorry for him because he was my younger brother. I tried advising him about his attitude with women in the past, but he always says he knows what he is doing. Now, he understands he doesn't know anything, and he has no idea. My pity for him soon changed to anger because he is the reason why I can't eat this night, and can't leave the table in my room and do something else before I sleep off. Thanksgiving night soon became a confusing night at our place. Thanksgiving night in my house is not the day to give thanks. I had longed for this night, and this is the only day I get to eat pumpkin pie. I like pumpkin pie, and it is my favorite. I had made plans with Mum on how the pie must look. Pie looks like I had planned with Mum, but I might not eat it. Mrs. Givenchy, my mom's sister, is absent-minded. For sure, she's seated, but you can quickly tell she's not with us. It is embarrassing for her. She had lost her face, her daughters had embarrassed her, and Mr. Givenchy is not understanding. Why did this have to happen? It concerns me, but right now, I want to fill my stomach. This is a fundamental cause for the family, but I can think of the pumpkin pie that I can't eat in front of me. Leah and MY were the most confused individuals in the room. They had lost their face. The two are sitting at my two sides, but I am avoiding looking at their face. I feel uncomfortable. They are my longed-for cousins, and now we have met, but we can't enjoy the time. I know we might not see again. Mr. Givenchy will do everything to stop them from coming. They won't want to come even if they are permitted to do so. This family is messed up already. Jake and I are the two with no compromised personalities among the family members. Jake is not concerned about the whole event, but I want to eat. My dad was cracking some stupid jokes before my mom shut him up. Now, he just placed his head in his palm. My dad is not the quiet one, but now he is as quiet as the graveyard. No one made a noise. Our dinner had not been this silent until today. I didn't know what had happened, and Mom didn't say much. But Jake hinted to me about the uproar while I was busy working at Durrant's place. How I wish he didn't update me. I would have lackadaisically eaten the meal. Before anyone could stop me from eating, I would have gulped a few slices. But now my hunger is mixed with emotions. Jake was not emotional at all, and the guy was enjoying his time. He has always been the bad boy of the house, but today it is his time to prove that there is a worse. How I wish I should just stay in the store, sleep there perhaps. While at the dining table, my mind went back to the event at the store earlier today. A customer came to buy a couple of goods. He took some extra stuff and tucked them in his jacket's pocket. He got to the counter and placed all the goods in the cart on the table. I gave him the price for the goods, then I asked him for the rest. Your money is $60, sir. Will you be paying for the rest of the goods? I asked, which other goods are you talking about? He laughed in return. I replied calmly, the ones in your jacket's pocket. I can help you get them out if you don't mind, and I will love it if you respect yourself, sir. I said, calmly proud of myself. The people in the queue had started looking at the man with a funny face. Oh, he said I had almost forgotten, he said as he brought out the stuff. The people in the queue applauded my sharpness. Little did they know that there were CCTVs at every store corner. I grinned at their ignorance. Mr. Durant will be proud of me for that. More than that, I am proud of myself. Juliet. A voice snapped me out from the only thing I had enjoyed since I had gotten home. Why are you smiling? Mrs. Givenchy asked. Who is the boy? She asked again. Which boy? I responded, quite shocked with the questions. The boy you're thinking of that is making you smile, she replied. You are old enough to have a boyfriend, so don't be ashamed, she continued. So, your two daughters are also old enough to screw one guy. I said to myself, that would have been a very nasty thing to say, and my mom won't be pleased with that. I responded to her views by just smiling. She smiled back. Just a call from Hope where Mr. Durant will be appreciated at this point in time. I don't know how to cook a lie. My mom knows I don't have any science projects to do since I had finished them 2 weeks ago. I should have gone camping. I didn't go because Hope said it would be boring. She said the last year's camp she attended was nothing to write home about. It was a total waste of her time. I should have gone anyways because Mr. Durant said he did not mind giving me the 2 weeks off. But considering Hope's experience, I changed my mind. Now, I am stuck in a Thanksgiving drama, and I am forced to play a significant role. While I was lost in my thought, Mr. Givenchy had finally returned from receiving his call. That was my boss, he said. To be precise, our company is planning to have a branch somewhere in Africa, Nigeria. And I will be heading the project, he rejoined. That was a piece of good news, but it wasn't enough to clear the cloud at the dining table. My dad congratulates him and wishes him the best of luck, and I do so myself. His wife pecked him. Leah, MYA, and Fred can't even say a thing. It was apparent the twins are happy for their dad's achievement but could not say a thing because of their current position on things, while my little brother still has his head on the table. I haven't seen his face since I got home. He has been in that position forever. Is he crying, or he is just ashamed? Pumpkin pie is not really his thing. That is, there are a few bowls of noodles on the table. He can't eat them anymore, too, because they would have been cold. Oh, that reminds me what time it is. I raised my head up to check the wall clock hanging on the wall towards the living room. I can't believe my eyes, it is just 10 minutes to 10. So, I have been at this table for just 20 minutes. It looked like 3 hours to me already. Why is the time so slow? How can I get myself away from the mess I am finding myself in? I looked at Jake. He seems to be enjoying himself. His eyes are glued to the TV, and sometimes he presses his phone. I would have loved to press my phone now, too, only that Mom said, no phone at the dining. I sighed. Everybody looked in my direction, but no one said a thing. It is normal to sigh at this moment. That has been the most common means of communication since I got back from work. The only person found laughing is Jake, and no one can tell him to stop. Not even Dad. He is on a league of his own. He had been the different one among us since he was little. He has no regard for Fred and me until recently. He fought a lot at school and does not care about the principal reports of him. He loves to be alone. You can't enter his rooms unless you get his knocking code right, not even Dad. Mom is the only one left out of that criterion. He loves his privacy. He feels like he does not really fit in with the family, and that everyone does not really like him. I will look like that if you're always the subject at every family meeting. He is used to being left alone, and today, no one can force him to join the awkward family moment. I never wished to be in his shoes for once, but today I would have appreciated it. The pumpkin pie is cold, the bowl of noodles is cold, and Mr. Givenchy is still yet to say his remark on Thanksgiving Day. Fred is still yet to raise his head, and my mom and her sister are ready to clear the table. No Thanksgiving right on Thanksgiving night, I said to myself. I should have bought a few burritos before heading home. I didn't because I am saving for college. No, here I am, no food nor happiness on a Thanksgiving night because my aunt, her husband, and the twins came visiting. This is the worst Thanksgiving ever, and all blame to the twins and Fred. I am not involved in this mess, and I don't want to. I don't even know how it started, although Fred hinted to me about the progress. I warned him, but he neglected my warning because he wanted to satisfy his urge. Urge satisfied, mess showed up. What a night, isn't it? Hope had said she would call me. I am here expecting her call, but maybe the girl is enjoying herself, or the babe had slept off. The girl can sleep a lot. When we were in elementary school, we were asked to say our hobby, I remembered saying mine was playing video games. I am no more a fan of video games. But my friend said her hobby is sleeping. Every other kid laughed at her. She was really ashamed of herself. But before the day ended, my friend still slept in class. That is my hope for you. Ah still enjoys sleeping to date. Maybe that is why I am her only friend. We both don't have the luxury of time to share. We are a perfect fit for each other. She sleeps a lot, I work a lot. I helped my mom and her sister clean up. Since no one was eating and really cared about the food, I took some slices. And I headed straight to my room, leaving my mom and her sister to wash the dishes. With what happened, I expected my mom and her sister to resolve it with a big argument, but it seems nothing can come in between the two sisters. Good for them, unlike my siblings, a small toy can be a good reason for them to exchange blows. My dad and Mr. Givenchy are outside talking like a man to man. I am in my room upstairs, looking at them below. I was checking on them to avoid all kinds of havoc. If their men's talk turns to punch exchange, I can quickly call upon their wives to resolve it. Now, I have all the time for myself. I have the piece of pumpkin pie I had been craving, and I can now chat with my phone. I opened my phone, and I saw 2 messages from Hope. What? I didn't notice the notification sound. Oh, my phone is still silent. It is late already, and I can't go out anymore. I enjoyed the pumpkin pie. I need to get myself a cup of fruit juice. I went downstairs to the kitchen. I got myself the juice. Mom and her sister are still enjoying each other's company. Fred is now in the living room with his phone. I guessed he is working on his video blog. Jake is still busy with the drama series that will end in less than an hour. Mia and MYA are reading a book. Everyone seems to be minding their business. Jake saw me and came close to me. He sipped part of the juice and followed me to my room. This is funny, Jake has never entered my room, and neither had I entered him since his 10th birthday. It has been 5 years since then, and now he wanted to enter my room. Of course, he's always welcome. He's my little brother. We entered the room, and he asked me, "Are you interested in knowing what happened?" He asked, "Haven't you told me already?" I responded, "You really need to know some parts," he said as if he was about to tell me a mystery about the ancient world. This is what had caused the moody Thanksgiving celebration at the dining table earlier this night. Fred is just 17, though, although he is just 11 months younger than me. We are kind of close, but not one of us is close with Jake, who does things differently. Fred opened up quickly to me until when puberty started setting in, we got ashamed of sharing some physiological changes with one another. I got closer to Mom since she is of the same gender as me while he found comfort in the arms of Dad. I started experiencing puberty changes before he did. We first noticed my sudden increase in the breast. Before I didn't mind wearing panties with Fred around, then I stopped. I told my mom that it is normal for me to experience such change. She said I am becoming a woman. I don't want to become a woman, I usually tell myself then. Then a few weeks after, Menard showed up. Then, I needed to start using the pad and the likes. Fred was in my room when he had his first wet dreams. Had he been fantasizing about me? That increased our distance. We soon saw those changes as usual, and we reunited. Fred respected my privacy, but he didn't care about his. To date, he is the only person that opens his door. You don't have to knock before entering. He is a simple boy, to be honest. As Fred grew, his urge increased. He started experimenting with different things. He started clearing his web history for no reason in particular. I wanted to ask him about that, but I later found out that he had been doing the guy's thing. That wasn't enough, he started getting laid. Although he hasn't brought any girl home yet, I noticed his game with other girls since we are in the same class. And Hope once told me that Fred had approached her, but she declined because of our friendship. Hope has been a good friend. She is the most decent girl in the class. I am not as decent as I look, but I draw lines. I believe Fred has had enough of the school girls. He is still a cool-headed boy. I think that is what the girls fall for. Nobody really shares his stories at school. All he has done are in secret. Sometimes, he told me about some of his fish. Fred started venturing into online sexing and sex chatting. He met several ladies, younger or older, that are not interested in a serious relationship like him. They just want to get laid until their classmates expect a relationship. While on his course The Web Dating, he met a girl with 2 personalities. He told me about the strange girl that can be naughty today and calm tomorrow. I told him to step out of that relationship, that the lady might be playing with his feelings. Do I look like I have any feelings? He would ask, "That's true, you can be getting laid every week with your feelings attached." He just satisfied his unsatisfiable urge. He told me that what really attached him to that lady was that she looked like my doppelganger. I checked for myself and realized the lady looked like me. He traveled to meet the lady, and he got laid, mission completed. But this time, he wanted to get more. That was when it became real. This time the lady wasn't talking naughty as the first time, and he didn't really enjoy it. He told me everything. I could say that the lady might not be in the mood since I am not experienced. This morning, my mom told us that his sister and her family would be coming to celebrate Thanksgiving with us. I had seen the sister but had never seen her husband and the twins. We were all anticipating the coming of our cousins. I left for Mr. Durant's store for the day's job while my brothers helped arrange the house for the comfort of our guests. I closed the store by 9:09 p.m. sharp and took a taxi home rather than trekking as I am used to. I got home. My mom was moody yet preparing for the feast. The house was unnecessarily quiet. Then, Jake just me that the girl Fred had been meeting recently is twins and they are our cousins. How can this be resolved? How did they find out? Do you know how?
How Anita did the unthinkable even while she was still in love with her fiancé. Cheating is as old as humans. Some partners take it lightly while others go the extra mile to pay their cheating partners. This story talks about how two partners who loved themselves from the beginning eventually became strangers. The fiancé was doing his own thing while the fiancée was also doing her own thing. They were living under the same roof but they had a different ideology. Sit back, relax and enjoy this story. I met Chris when I traveled to London for holiday. It was the norm in my family then to always go on holiday towards the end of every year. In 2017, my dad decided that we should travel to London because my mom and I have not been to London before. Our holiday to London coincided with the time the London Derby was about to be played. We arrived in London on Thursday and the London Derby was to be played on Sunday. The city of London was very lively in anticipation of the London Derby between Chelsea Football Club and Arsenal Football Club. I asked my dad if that is how the streets of London are every time the London Derby was around the corner. My dad said there are many teams in London like Chelsea Football Club, Arsenal Football Club, Tottenham Football Club, and West Ham Football Club. He said these teams are all in the first tier of English football, which means they play each other regularly. He said there are other London teams in the second tier of English football too. He said none of the London derbies comes close to Arsenal versus Chelsea. He said the street will still witness more activities on Saturday and Sunday. The background of the teams that I heard from my dad made me fall in love with the city and the teams. I told my dad to book a ticket for all of us to watch the London Derby. I said I didn't want to miss any of the actions in the stadium because if the city is as lively as we saw, then the stadium will be more than what we were witnessing on the streets of London. My dad promised to book the ticket for the whole family when we settle in our hotel. We lodged into the Prime Hotel. My dad paid for 7 days because our holiday was supposed to last for 7 days. As soon as we settled down, I reminded my dad about the tickets. My dad asked me why I was eager to watch the match because he doesn't know me as a lover of football. I told him I wasn't much interested in the football itself, I am more interested in what will happen at the stadium. As soon as my dad booked the ticket, I went to my room while I left him and my mom in their room. I was very tired because of the long journey from the United States to London. While I lied on my bed, I could still hear the noise of the fans outside the hotel. I watched them through my window before I finally retired to my bed. I woke up the next day intending to tour the whole city. I went to my dad's room and I told him that he has to take me to major places around the city of London. My dad agreed to take me around the city of London. He said we should take our breakfast first. He said after taking our breakfast, we can rest a little bit before going out. I went back to my room to take my bath. After taking my bath, I joined my mom and dad in their room where we had breakfast. After breakfast, my dad called a taxi that would take us around the city of London. My dad bargained with the taxi man and he agreed to drive us for the whole day at the rate of $300. Emirates Stadium, which is the venue of the London Derby, was the first place we visited. We were taken through various buildings in the stadium. We were taken to the dressing room of the players, the training pitch, the volleyball pitch, and the trophy cabinet. We left the Emirates Stadium and moved to Stamford Bridge, which is the stadium of Chelsea Football Club. We were taken through the stadium's building including the training pitch, the volleyball pitch, the track and field stadium, and the trophy cabinet. Fortunately, the Chelsea Football Club players were having their final training session before the London Derby. So we stood there and watched them. After the training, we took pictures with some of the players and the coach. We left the Stamford Bridge Stadium and moved to the Tower of London. The Tower of London is one of the world's most famous buildings. We went through all the rooms in the building. From the Tower of London, we moved to the Emirate Airline cable car. The Emirate Airline cable car provides a stunning view of the city departing every 30 seconds from the Greenwich Peninsula and the Royal Docks. From the Emirate Airline cable, we moved to the London Transport Museum. The London Transport Museum hosts an exhibition connecting transport with the social and cultural history of London. We saw more than 80 vehicles spanning 200 years of London's history, including a Red Route Master bus and the world's first underground steam train. We ended our tour at the Warner Bros. Studio. At the Warner Bros. Studio, we saw first-hand sets, costumes, and props used in the Harry Potter films. We were taken into some of the film locations including the Great Hall, Dumbledore's office, and Hagrid's hut. After taking a tour of the Warner Bros. Studio, we entered into our taxi and headed back to our hotel. We arrived at our hotel at exactly 9:15 p.m. My dad paid the taxi driver and we went into our hotel room. Days passed by and we continued to enjoy our stay in London. On Saturday, which was a day before the showdown, Chelsea Football Club supporters and Arsenal Football Club supporters held a rally at different points in London. Chelsea supporters held their rally in front of Stamford Bridge while Arsenal fans held their own in front of Emirates Stadium. We joined Chelsea's rally because our hotel was closer to Stamford Bridge than Emirates Stadium. The D-Day arrived. The match was scheduled to hold at 2 p.m. but my dad told me that we have to prepare to leave the hotel by 10 or 11 a.m. because of the crowd that will be in front of the stadium. As soon as I heard that from my dad, I rushed to my room to take my bath while my dad entered his bathroom too. My mom went to the kitchen to prepare a light breakfast. By the time my dad and I finished taking our bath, breakfast was ready. My mom had already eaten her breakfast. She left breakfast on the table while she went to the bathroom to take her bath. By the time my mom finished taking her bath, my dad and I had finished eating breakfast. While we were taking our breakfast, my dad had already called the taxi driver that took us on tour. The taxi driver arrived at 10:25. He called my dad that he was already in front of our hotel. We left our room and joined him. On our way to the stadium, we met different people with different costumes on the road. Arsenal fans had red costumes while Chelsea fans had blue costumes. We arrived at the Emirates Stadium at exactly 11:15 a.m. A journey that was not more than 20 minutes became 45 minutes because of the number of people on the road. When we arrived at the Emirates Stadium, we joined a queue of more than 200 people. The attendants were checking everybody's ticket with a computer because they wanted to prevent forgery. After about an hour and 30 minutes, it got to our turn. My dad presented his ticket, my mom's ticket, and my ticket to the attendant for checking. It took the attendant more than 10 minutes to confirm our ticket. We gained access to the stadium at exactly 1 p.m. When we entered the stadium, we began another round of searches. Because of the population of fans in the stadium, it was difficult to find a seat. 10 minutes into our search, we finally got a seat close to a man. But we had a problem because the seats we got were 2 and we were 3. I raised my head a little bit and I saw a seat close to a guy. My mom and dad sat on the 2 seats while I went to the vacant seat that was close to the guy. The atmosphere in the stadium was electrifying. I was enjoying every bit of it. The atmosphere of the stadium is what I wanted to see and I was enjoying it. At exactly 3 p.m., the players came out for the warm-up. They were received by huge applause from fans of both teams. While I was shouting and cheering both teams, I noticed that the guy that was sitting close to me was looking at me. Every time our eyes met, he would look another way as if he was not looking at me. I was just smiling because I understood him perfectly. At exactly 3:20 a.m., the players returned to the dressing to fully prepare for the match. When the players walked back into the dressing room, the atmosphere of the stadium became a little bit relaxed. The noise from both fans went down a little bit. The guy that was sitting close to me felt that was the opportunity he needed to have a conversation with me. He finally summoned the courage to talk to me. He looked at me and said he has been enjoying how I have been cheering both teams. He asked me which of the teams that am I a fan of. I told him that I am not a fan of any of the team. He looked very surprised when he heard that. I told him that I am not even a football lover. I told him I had just come to the city with my family to have some fun. I told him that it was the mood of the city that drove me to the stadium. I told him how everywhere in the city was in a carnival mod when I arrived in London. I said it was the mood of the city that made me ask my dad what was happening, and he told me that was how the city usually comes to life when it's time for the London Derby. You could see the surprise on his face when I was talking. He asked for my name and I told him that my name is Anita. He told me that his name is Joseph. He asked me where I came from and I told him that I came all the from the United States with my family to have fun. Joseph smiled when I told him that I came from the United States. I saw the smile on his face which prompted me to ask why he was smiling. He said he is also from the United States. I asked him which state is he from and he said he lives in Alabama. I smiled also. I told him my family and I live in Georgia. I told him my family and I visit Alabama frequently because we have a family friend there. Joseph asked me when I will be returning to the United States. I told him that our holiday is supposed to last for 7 days and we have spent 4 days already. I said it means we will be going back to the United States in the next 3 days. Joseph said he came to London for a project and the project will last for 14 days. He said he will be returning to the United States after the completion of the project. While Joseph and I were having a conversation, the players began to walk onto the pitch. At that point, Joseph and I could not hear each other because the stadium has erupted. The noise was too much for us to hear ourselves. Joseph told me that we should enjoy the football because once the match begins, the noise will be louder than what we are hearing. 5 minutes after the players walked onto the pitch, the match began. Chelsea Football Club had the better possession in the 5 minutes. They looked threatening in front of the goal, but the Arsenal defense was resolute. 20 minutes into the match, Chelsea Football Club took the lead through Eden Hazard. The Chelsea Supporters Club took over the pitch. You could hear their noise loudly even though Arsenal Football Club was the home team. 45 minutes after, the referee blew the whistle for the end of the first half. While the players were walking down the tunnel, a lot of spectators also left their seats to get some refreshment. Joseph and I continued our conversation because the noise reduced drastically. Joseph sarcastically told me that we have only 15 minutes to talk because the players will back on the pitch after 15 minutes. Joseph said what we can talk about in 15 minutes. I told him that we cannot have any meaningful discussion in 15 minutes. He asked me for my cell phone number and I gave them to him. He asked me if we could see before I travel back to the United States. I told him I do not think it will be possible because, after the match, my parent and I will head back to our hotel. I said we can only be talking on the phone. I said if he returns to the United States after his project, we will have time to talk to each other. 15 minutes after the players left the pitch, they returned to the pitch for the second half. 12 minutes into the second half, Arsenal Football Club equalized through Theo Walcott. The home fans got their voice back. 84 minutes into the match, Arsenal got the winning through Theo Walcott again. The home fans were in a jubilant mood. The away stand became silent as they started sensing defeat. At exactly 95 minutes, the referee blew the whistle for the end of the match. Arsenal Football Club players and coaches came to the fans to celebrate with them. While the celebration was going on, Joseph told me he was leaving. He said he has something important to attend to. My father also decided that we have had enough fun. He said we should return to our hotel to rest. He said the taxi driver was already waiting for us outside. Exiting the stadium was not easy because of the crowd. After about 10 minutes of finding our way, we were able to exit the stadium and join our taxi. Getting to our hotel was also not easy because there were a lot of cars on the road. After about 1.5 hours on the road, we arrived at our hotel. We were all tired, so we all went into our rooms. The next morning we were in our rooms throughout the day. We didn't go out like we used to. We spent the rest of our holidays most in our hotel room. A day before our departure day, I did some laundry with my mom. We packed our entire luggage and prepared for our departure the next day. My dad woke me up at exactly 5 a.m. on Sunday because he didn't want us to miss our flight. We all took our baths and headed to the airport in our usual taxi. We got to Georgia at exactly 2 p.m. By 3 p.m., we were in our house. When we got home, Joseph was the first person I called. I told him that we just landed in the United States. Joseph was very happy for me. He said he will also be in the United States in a few days. He said he can't wait to meet me when he lands in the United States. I graduated from high school a few weeks before we traveled to London. I have been at home ever since I graduated because the admission into college was not out. I approached my father that night and I told him I want to learn how to play volleyball. I told him rather than sitting at home doing nothing, engaging myself in volleyball will be better. My father accepted and he told me that he will take me to a volleyball center for registration the next day. My father woke me very early the next day because he wanted to take me to the volleyball center on his way to work. I took my bath very quickly and I joined him in the car. We got to the volleyball center around 7 a.m. We met a lot of volleyball players who came for training. We were directed to the office of the management for official registration. After registration, I was given all the kits I need for training. I joined other ladies on the pitchy while my dad drove to his office. The training ended at 11 a.m. After the training, the coach addressed all players. He introduced me to all of them. He said he wants me to put a lot of effort into becoming a fantastic volleyball player. After the address, I left the center and headed home. As soon as I got home, I took my bath and I went straight into the kitchen because I was very hungry. Every morning, I joined my father in his car to the center. The population of players kept increasing every day, which gave room for competition. A few weeks into my training, I started getting a lot of recognition. After training on Friday, we were told that we have a volleyball match against Titan Queens on Sunday. The coach said we should all listen to the names of that have been selected for the match. When the coach mentioned my name, I was very happy. When I got home, I told my mom that she has to come and watch. I called my dad on phone and I told him too. They all agreed to come and watch me play volleyball. I was the first person to wake up on Sunday. We were told to come for early morning training before the match. I went to my parents' door to inform them of my movement. I told them that the match was slated for 11 a.m., therefore, they should wait till 10:30 a.m. before leaving the house. I waved them goodbye and I left. When I got to the center, the coach and some players were already there. We did our training before we headed to the team hotel to rest. At exactly 10 a.m., we left the team hotel and returned to the center. The opposing team arrived around that time too, so we had a familiarity walk with them. At exactly 10:45, we went back into the dressing room to change into our jerseys. 5 minutes after, we were told to walk onto the pitch by the referee. As I was walking onto the court, I saw my mom and my dad in the stand. We won the match by a wide margin. I played the best game of my life. At the end of the match, I was voted for as the best player. My parents were very happy with my performance. I took pictures with them, my coach, my teammates, and the players from the opposing team. On our way home, my dad could not contain his joy. He said he was happy with how proud I made him. He said I should take my volleyball training seriously. He said I should not hesitate to come to him if I need anything that will enhance my volleyball training. When we got home, my dad told my mom to prepare a very delicious meal for dinner. He said he wants her to prepare a meal that we will all enjoy. He ordered expensive wines from the local mall near us. Our house was in a carnival mood that day. We ate to our satisfaction. We took some of the food to our neighbors. I went to bed that night feeling like a queen. Not even my graduation from high school got me this emotional. I called Joseph and informed him of how I made everybody in my home proud today. Joseph was very happy too. He said he will be in the United States the next Sunday. He said what I did calls for celebration and we will celebrate it together. 7 days after, Joseph was back in the United States. I was the first person he called when he arrived. He told me how stressful his journey was and how tiring his project was. After talking about his trip and his project, Joseph said he will like us to meet on Tuesday. He said he would have chosen Monday, but he needs a lot of rest. I obliged his request. Around 7 p.m. on Monday, I called Joseph to ask him where we were going to meet and the time we are to meet. He said we should meet at his house by noon. I had the intention of skipping my volleyball practice before I called him, but his response changed my mind. If we were to meet by noon, then I can go to my volleyball training before going to see him. I woke up at exactly 6 a.m. on Tuesday. I joined my father in his car. He dropped me at my training center while he drove to work. Normally, our training usually ends by 11 a.m., but I told my coach that I have an important thing to attend to. Therefore, I have to live by 10 a.m. I left training at 10:00 a.m. and I got home by 10:30 a.m. I took my bath and I came to the kitchen to eat my breakfast. After taking my breakfast, I called Joseph and I told him I was on my way. I left the house at 11 a.m. I was fortunate to get a taxi in front of our house. The taxi dropped me in front of Joseph's house around 11:50 a.m. When the taxi dropped me, I called Joseph and I told him to come and pick me in front of his house. A few seconds later, Joseph came out and we both entered his house. Joseph's apartment was very nice. He had the latest electronics in his house. I told him that I like what I saw. I said that is how a house should be. Joseph was just smiling at me. He asked me what he should offer me. I told him that I ate before I left my house, because I didn't want him to have a feeling that I don't want to take anything in his house. I told him to give me a bottle of wine. He went to the fridge and brought the bottle of wine. He dropped the wine in front of me and sat close to me on the couch. I was wondering why he sat very close to me. Joseph said he has not been himself since the first day he saw me at the Emirates Stadium. He said since then, he has been thinking of sitting close to me again like he is doing presently. Joseph said he loves me and he wants to spend the rest of his life with me. He didn't give me a chance to talk. Before I could say anything, Joseph's hands were already in my cloth and his lips were on my lips. He was kissing me with his lips while he was using his hand to caress every part of my body. He was touching me where I wanted to be touched. I kept moaning as his hands were going through all my body. When he noticed that I could not take him anymore, he carried me to his bed and we continued from where we stopped. We had great sex which lasted for more than 2 hours. After the sex, both of us entered the bathroom to freshen up. After taking my bath, I entered the kitchen to cook what we were going to eat because we were all hungry. In 30 minutes, the food was ready. We ate together. The kissing continued while we were eating, but I told Joseph that we cannot have sex again that day. I left Joseph's house at around 5 p.m. I got home feeling excited because it has been a long time since I had sex. The last time I had sex was when I was in high school. The sex I had then cannot be compared to what Joseph gave me. It was the best sex I have ever had. Days went by and our relationship became stronger. We began to do a lot of things together. I go to his house regularly and he comes to our house regularly too. Everybody in the neighborhood began to see us together frequently. Those we were hiding our relationship for when we started now know that something is happening between the both of us. 6 months into our relationship, Joseph invited me to the cinema. He said he wants me to watch the new movie released by Van Damme. When we got to the cinema, we met a lot of people who came to watch the movie. The movie was making waves, so everybody was trooping to the cinema to watch the movie. When we finally got our ticket, I was about to enter the hall when Joseph held my hand tightly. The next thing I saw was that Joseph was on the ground with his 2 knees. I was still wondering what Joseph was trying to do until I saw a ring in his hand. Joseph proposed to me in front of the crowd. I was speechless because everybody in the cinema was looking at us. I became shy and I didn't know what to say. I summoned the courage to say yes to his proposal. After the proposal, we went into the hall to watch the movie. After watching the movie, I rushed home to show my mom the ring Joseph gave me. My mom could not believe it. She was so happy for me. She prayed for me and encouraged me to do the right things. 1 month after Joseph proposed to me, I thought it was right for me to move to his apartment and start staying with him since we will be getting married soon. I told my parents about it and they agreed. I called Joseph and told him about it and he agreed too. Since everybody was in support of what I wanted to do, I felt it was right for me to do it. I finally moved into Joseph's apartment and we started living like couples. We did almost everything together. The love we had for each other became stronger than it was before. A few weeks after I moved in with Joseph, I started noticing strange behaviors from him. He started doing things that he did not used to do before. He started coming home late. Sometimes he won't even come home at all. He started ignoring my calls when he is at work and he doesn't eat when he gets home. One day, he came back from work looking very tired. I confronted him with all the questions I have wanted to ask him. He listened to all my questions but he didn't give any tangible answer. After that, he told me he is going on an official trip to Spain. He said he will be there for 2 weeks. At that point, I knew that Joseph has started seeing someone else. I started blaming myself for moving in with him. I thought we could have been better if we weren't staying together. If I had stayed back, I wouldn't know if he is cheating or not. At least, my mind will be at rest. On the day of the official trip he claimed he was going, I overheard him talking to a lady on the phone. I didn't hear what he told her but I knew he was talking to a lady. At that point, I decided to take revenge. I had a neighbor who has been eyeing me since I came to the house. He always compliments my dressing. Anytime we meet, he does not forget to tell me how beautiful I am. From the way he talks to me when we meet, I knew that he loves me. I was determined to take revenge on what Joseph was doing to me. On the day he was traveling, I followed him to the airport and made sure he boarded his flight before I left the airport. When I returned home, I went straight to my neighbor's room. I told him that my husband has traveled, so I need someone I could talk to. I said I didn't want to stay in the room alone because it was boring. He went to his fridge and brought me a drink. He was about to return to where he was sitting when I draw him back. I didn't allow him to say anything. I started kissing him roughly. You could see it was what he was craving for with the way he was moaning. He walked me to his bed and we continued until we were all exhausted. Hey, guys, please let me know if this is right or if this is what I should do or please let me have your thoughts on this.
I am male, 18, but I love my math teacher. She is 42. Hi, I'm Danny. I am not a popular guy in school until recently. Do not think of me as a loner. No, I am not. I have friends, Jeff, Phil, and Bill. They are the best. The 4 of us had attending school at the bottom of our preference list until some new teachers were posted to our school to replace the retired ones. That was the time I had a change of view about the school. Do not get ahead of yourself. Academics was not the reason for my sudden change of mind. Before I tell you about what made me love schooling, it is good to be familiar with my background. I thought I had been living a normal life. Even to date, not so much had changed. Some people would say I got worse with my weird taste of a woman. I don't care. All I know is that love is in the eyes of the beholder. My full name is Daniel Dawson. I am the second child out of 4 children of Dawson's family. My father is a pilot. He barely comes home. I wonder how he has the time to be with Mum to make us. Even in the festive period, he is either in Italy, Brazil, or one of his weird islands. It is a norm for this family to celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving without our father. Mum usually defends by saying, he is trying his best, and he is doing all this for the family. How am I supposed to understand that? But I was fine with it anyway. I had only seen my dad physically not more than 20 times, thanks to technology. He now speaks with us regularly either individually or as a family. I remembered when I got my first opportunity with the school basketball team. I shared my achievement with the family and luckily for me, Dad got to know. He promised he would be available. I was all optimistic even though I didn't trust him. To be candid, I have never trusted him. How will I trust the person I barely know? On the day of the match, I was aligned with the first team. I looked around for my father. He was nowhere to be found. I was disappointed, even though I was certain he won't come. My mom and my siblings were there to cheer me up. Thank God he didn't even show up. I was awful to the extent that my coach had to sub me off in the first quarter and he never gave me any chance to prove myself again. There goes my hope of becoming a professional basketball player. We lost the match 102-67. I guessed I wasn't the only bad player on the team. My mom is on another level. She was a nurse before she resigned. Only Dave was aware of that. It was immediately after she gave birth to me that she resigned from the health department. She now has her toys store. It sounds like a masculine job, but my mom is doing great with this. She told us that she resigned from her job and began the toys selling business because she wanted to be there for us since our father is all busy. That is true. We met everything to her. We stayed at her place after school, and we all go home as a family when she is done for the day's work. That had been the norm until we all got to high school. Everyone with his or her own business. We only leave home together but don't come back home as a family. Everyone has now developed their interests. Things are now done individually instead of as a family. My mother tried to return the family to the good old days, but it wasn't that easy. We now have something to care about. Howbeit, we still eat dinner together as a family. That is where we share our stories. We know about ourselves at the dining. My two little sisters are the taciturn ones while Dave is so boisterous and expressive. For me, I am just another member of the family. My favorite member of the family is still my mother. I love to open up to her privately. She understands me best compared to anyone else. My elder brother, Dave, is the perfect example of an elderly figure. He is very accommodating and understanding. Unlike the other three of us, he understands Dad better. He even develops likeness for some of Dad's hobbies. He loves visiting new places just like Dad, but had vowed not to become a pilot. To him, that is the riskiest job ever, and to add to that, it won't be the best available job for a family man. Dave wants to become a pharmaceutical sales rep because of his love for visiting new places. He is currently studying pharmacy at the university. He is a very bright student. He was the best graduating student in his set. He is also the valedictorian, and he gave a wonderful speech. I was so proud of him that day. He is not good at sport, none of us are, but he is my #1 fan even though I suck at basketball. He has no interest in sport, but he has never missed any of my games. He is playing his newly found role as a father very well. Besides academics and visiting new places, he is also fond of card tricks. My dad was fond of that too. Both of them spent more time doing card tricks. I don't know much about card tricks, but my dad is very good. So is Dave. Dad taught Dave how to go about card tricks and gave Dave his cards, but Dave is now on another level in card tricks. While at high school, he had competed at many levels and he had medals to prove for that. He was the regional and national champion before leaving the school. Our school does not only suck at basketball, it sucks in every game. But the only medals we had won from chess and card tricks were all won by Dave. Before leaving high school, he was a name to reckon with. Who doesn't know David Dawson? Most people expected me to fit into his shoes when he left high school for college, but soon knew they were thinking highly of me. I am nothing close to him. Even with the wide difference between us, Dave is very proud of his little brother, and I am proud of him too. He means a lot to the family. I had pharmacy as a strenuous course, yet Dave still had time to check on us and share festive moments with us. He is such a darling. Mom would be proud of that kind of son coming out of her vagina. I am proud of being the next. My dad had supported his dreams without asking questions. Dave was the luck of the family. Danielle is my immediate younger sister, while Dora is the last. Those two are best of friends. They do things together. Funny enough, they don't share their feelings with either of our parents. Unlike Dave and I, we shared our feelings with Dad and Mum respectfully. Those two share their feelings. I am not proud to be called their elder brothers, because I don't know anything about the two of them. Danielle is in a relationship with one of my friends, Phil. I didn't buy this idea. I almost fought with Phil, but I later got to understand that Danielle liked him. Coming between them will do more bad than good. I quit getting between them and focused on helping them nurture a good relationship. I told Phil that if he breaks my sister's heart, I will break his head instead. Scary, isn't it? I didn't mean it. I was just buffing you now, right? So far so good. The two are doing well in their relationship. I wanted to know more of what was going in between them, but Danielle was not pleased with that action, and she is ready to take me up on that. Naturally, Danielle is not a vocal person, but in this matter, she threw tantrums and caused some unnecessary scenes. I quickly calmed myself and never interfered in their matter. Dora, on the other hand, is almost like Danielle, but she has an interest in shipwrecks. Dad once asked her what she will like to become. She was not afraid to say, she will like to be a diver. She meant that. She has also been traveling to islands and some other places to see shipwrecks. She had once watched documentaries on shipwrecks for a whole day. She took all her meals in the room that day. No one dares to distract her. She has a do not knock post on her door. I won't lie, and Dora is the most respected individual in the house. You can't just afford to trespass. She had some collections in her room. She had been keeping her weird collections since she was 6. Mum was not fine with how things are going with her. Mother wanted her to be more sociable. But Dora is not interested in people. She is more interested in her dirt than in people. The only person that understands her is Danielle. Danielle is a good listener. She is not good with talking, unlike Dave. She barely fights with other people because you don't even know what she is thinking. By so doing, Dora sees comfort in her. I am the most confused person in the family. Everyone seems to have one or two things that interest them except me. To make matters worse, I have selected the wrong people as friends. We don't have any plan for our lives. We do things as we are moved based on impulses except for Phil, the businessman. I was the only one to make the basketball team once. The other three can't even throw the ball. They were sent out of training on their first trial. In terms of academics, I wasn't the best either. Dave was a genius while I am just one of those boys in class trying very hard not to repeat a year. My grades aren't too bad, but nothing compared to Dave. Most people compared with my brother, but even with me trying, I am still not an inch close to him. After several trials, I got confused and I started making mistakes. I made wrong decisions. Chose the wrong friends, and it got late to make those corrections. Even though I am much better than my friends, I still love their company. Jeff is more like the head of the gang. He gives directives on what we are to do as a team. All his ideas are about crafting things and building stuff. We are not the party kind of person, but we are very useful in starting one. We have never hosted any party, but we are good at designing and setting up one. Jeff is the ringleader because his mother is an event planner. He sometimes goes to work with his mom to help her. My friends and I are weird to others, but when we went camping with the school, we are most respected. Due to our creativity and wide imagination, we make camping interesting. Hunting for games is my favorite event in camps. Jeff, Phil, and Bill have their weirdness. Phil is the business mogul in the gang. As a teenager, he has his own company. He is involved in recycling plastic waste. This was his grandfather's business before he died. He took over from him and had made it more prosperous compared to his grandfather's achievement. Phil was the black sheep of the family until he discovered his part. Phil is my best friend. We have been friends since preschool. Phil and his family are our neighbors. He is the last child of the family and by far the difference. Every person in their family is in the law firm. But Phil hates the white and black gown. He had been trying his best to be unique and different from other members of his family, and he is successful. Phil even employed Jeff, Bill, and I into his business as part-time workers. What else can a friend do for you? He even pays us handsomely. Such a nice guy. Since I had stopped going to Mum's toy store to help her, I have been going to his place to earn myself some cash. He is now having intimate affairs with Danielle. I didn't like it at first, but as an elder brother, I want the best for my little sister. And more so, Danielle doesn't buy the idea of me muddling in her matters since she doesn't interfere with mine. Bill is like a mind suggestion. He is a politician. He had been involved in so many protests in the past, but the one that he did that gained him national recognition was when he protested against the mayor for his lackadaisical attitude towards the School Child Act. He was optimistic about free lunch for all pupils and students at school. He had written letters, but they were not attended to. He booked an appointment with Mr. President and poured out his mind to him. Mr. President respected his opinion and asked the mayor to put it in place. I was proud of him. He was given a national award for it. Unlike the rest of us, he is in love with history and books. On average, he reads nothing less than 4 books in a month. But the sad part is that they are not of academic importance. Most of the books he reads are usually about politics and history. His favorite subject is history. It all began on one fateful afternoon when there was an announcement for all the students to come to the hall. We all get out of our various classes. The hallway was filled up. We could barely walk. All of us were trying to get ahead of ourselves. There was pushing here and there. Jeff whispered into my ears. He had been using the opportunity to pinch people and hit the backside of the ladies. No one caught him. He made me see him hit a lady's buttocks. The lady looked back, looked around, but since she didn't notice anything, faced her front. We laughed. I joined him in doing the same thing. I was almost caught, but this time I gave a straight face as if nothing happened. We eventually got to the hall. Mr. Howard, the principal, started speaking to us. He introduced us to a few of our teachers who will be retiring. He spoke so highly of them. My friends and I were not paying attention. We were even playing stone, paper, and scissors. Mr. Albertson, the old geography teacher, was awarded as the longest-serving teacher in the school history. It is common within the school premises that some of the teachers were once his student. The school choir was allowed to perform. They made a great show. There was a round of applause among the audience. They also sang the school anthem in another lyric. It was a great performance. It caught my attention. As they were rounding up, we saw Mr. Howard showing some strange faces on the way to the podium. Before he started to talk this time, he cleared his throat first. "These are your new teachers," he said. "They had been transferred here from other schools in the town to replace the retiring ones," he rejoined. "Starting from the nearest person to me is Mr. Smith from Onward High, Mr. Johnson from Whitney High School, Mrs. Williams from Maryland High School, and Ms. Brown from Cartersville High." From that moment till the end of the program, my eyes were set on the stage, but I wasn't listening anymore. My eyes were set on Ms. Brown. She was the perfect lady that met all I had hoped so in a lady. No other lady had caught my attention in this manner before her. I looked at her and noticed every detail. She had a sculpted figure which was twine thin. Her waist was tapered and she had a burnished complexion. A pair of arched eyebrows looked down on sweeping eyelashes. Her delicate ears framed a button nose. A set of dazzling angel white teeth gleamed as she blew gently on her carmine red fingernails. It was a pleasure to see her flowing, moon-shadow black hair. Her enticing, constellation blue eyes gazed at me over her puffy, heart-shaped lips. She felt her lips taste strawberry sweet when even without kissing her. She had a bouncy personality and a sugary voice, which I adored. Not content to be just another drone, she wore a vibrant dress. "She's the one. She is the one. She is the one built by God to satisfy me." I kept saying those words to myself. "Hey bro, are you not going home?" That was Bill. The whole place was almost empty, yet I didn't notice. Ms. Brown and the other new teachers had left the stage. Mr. Howard is nowhere to be found. How come I was still seeing Ms. Brown on the stage? I should have left school for Phil's backyard recycling factory, but I didn't. I left school for a home in a hurry. The first time in a long time, I got home with a smile on my face. It was obvious that I was happy. Danielle and Dora asked me who the lucky girl was. "No one," I replied. At the dinner, Mum just smiled at me. When everyone had gone to sleep, I overheard my mum talking to Dave on the phone. "I think he has gotten himself a girl." She was speaking to the other person on the line, whom I assume must be Dave. I lied on my bed. Then there came the next night. I don't know how I got to the countryside, but it was fine since Ms. Brown was there too. The moon's delicate light had just turned the world aflame with silver when I saw her. She had a comely figure which was stem thin. Her curvilinear waist didn't surprise me as much as the saffron tint to her complexion. She must be a native, I thought to myself. Her crescent-shaped eyebrows inclined slightly as she saw me staring at her. I yelped at being caught. Her languid eyelashes of velvet black blinked once slowly as if to invite me over. When I came closer, I noticed her scrolled ears and her elegant nose. She nuzzled me with her nose and I couldn't believe it. It was the custom for her people, I reckoned. It was love at first light. Her luminous, heavenly white teeth flashed as she pawed at me with her film star nails. Her hair was a glorious tumble of starbeam gold and her virility brown eyes set my heart a-thump. Her oxbow lips positively drooled with goodness. Oh, those sugar candy sweet lips, her elegant personality, all mesmerized me. She may not have had a saccharine voice or retro clothes, but what do you expect when two Labrador pups meet in a dog pound? "Danny, Danny, Danny." A voice from behind keeps calling my name. The voice sounds familiar, but I am enjoying the figure of Ms. Brown in front of me. Then, I felt a cloth leaving my body. I opened my eyes. It was a dream. "Oh my gosh, are you not going to school?" My mom asked after she succeeded in waking me from sleep. "Get yourself cleaned up. Get dressed and your food is in the kitchen," she said as she left my room. I was about to stand up from bed when I noticed that my shirt was wet. Oh no, what the hell just happened? I yelled. I had released, and by the look, this can never be a one-time release. Probably thrice or 4 times. It was much and noticeable. The bedsheet is sucked already. I can't leave it like this. I stood up from the bed, took away the blanket and bedspread, replaced them with a new one, run to the bathroom to wash up. I spent most of my time brushing my teeth for no reason. I groomed my hair. This time I changed the style. I get dressed in a well-ironed cloth and a shoe to match, sprayed me and go for my food, then left the house. Normally, I would wait for Bill to knock at our door then join him as we go to school. But today, things were not the same, not even me. Even though I left home without Bill, I still got to school late. Little did I know that he didn't wait for me after knocking at the door several times. Or did he? From the school entrance and through the hallway I was the center of attraction. Everyone was gazing at me. I noticed but pretended I didn't. I found my way to my locker to get some of my things, then came Laura. not the most beautiful girl in class, but most people say she is. To me, Elle is far cuter than her. I think it is about how yourself, exactly what I was doing that day. Hi handsome, said Laura. I looked at her as if I had an interest in her, but the truth is I don't, not at all. Laura, what's up? I asked. There is a party at Luke's place this Friday. If you don't mind, we can go together, she requested of me. Oh, Luke's party. Why won't I want to tag along, but I have this thing I want to do. I won't be able to come. I'm sorry, I said as sorry as possible. She sighed. I noticed she was trying to be calm as possible. Okay, what about going to watch a movie with me on Saturday? Then we might spice things up later in the day. He asked of me again. Oh, that too, it is just that. You'll be having something important to do too. She finished my sentence. Exactly, I said scornfully. She hissed and left me there standing. I didn't care about her anyways. I just wanted to see Ms. Brown, that's all. My friends noticed the change and came to me. I would have asked if today is your birthday. But I know you're born in May and this is November. So what is your problem? Asked Jeff. Nothing, I responded. I know you've tried to be cute, but I wasn't expecting you to be this good looking, said Bill. Calm down guys, nothing is up. I just felt like dressing nice today. I retaliated. It is Kike, I have been paying you too much. I will have to reduce your pay by 20%. Phil rejoined. You must be kidding me, I rejoined. So I can't dress well again. That's the problem, Bill interrupted. Are you going to see the mayor? Let me help you out. It was tough talking with those guys. They were determined to stress me out. We moved after a long chat that sounds like a police investigation with me. We got to our class and everyone sat on their seat. I was the center of attention in the classroom. I felt like Dave for the first time. I have never felt that kind of attention before until now. I was sitting gently while the whole class wasn't settled. Our class teacher, Mr. Alexis, came into the class with Ms. Brown to introduce her as our new math teacher. Here she is, I said to myself. I knew it was wrong fantasizing about my teacher, but I can't just help it. My eye was set in her breast. I imagined her being naked, then I concentrated on her nipples. I could figure it out with her dress on. I tried to look at her hips. I guess she noticed me looking at her, but I don't think she minded. After the introduction, Ms. Brown ran a quick test on us. We submitted and she took the sheets to her office. After a few minutes, she called for me. I got nervous. I did the test very well. Or did I impress her too much? I got to her office. I greeted her and she asked me to have my seat. I sat down and gave my test result. I scored 8 out of 10. What do you think? She asked. I need to buckle up, I replied, knowing for sure that wasn't the right answer. You did well, she said. Then she continued, do you know how old I am? 28, I presumed. No, you're wrong, she said. How old are you? I'm 18, I responded promptly. Okay, you're now legal, isn't it? Yes, Ma, I responded, swallowing my spit. I'm 42 years and I was caught looking at me at the class in an unacceptable manner. That is bad of you. Do you find me attractive? She asked. I couldn't say yes. I turned my head repeatedly. She stood up from her chair and sat on the table very close to me. She looked directly into my eyes and said, it is not a bad thing if you like me. I looked at her face and nodded my head. She undid a few of her buttons and bent close to me. I could see her big babies. Things are getting tense and I have started getting an erection. No, this is bad. Do you feel like touching them? She kissed me on the lips and whispered to my ears, keep it a secret. She went back to her seat, sat down, and asked me to leave. What just happened? I could not believe what just happened in there. I left, but my mind was not settled. Is this what I think it is? I am attracted to my math teacher. Is she also interested in me, or was she just playing with my emotions? Anyways, I will love to squeeze those babies on her chest and penetrate her. Oh, I am thinking that loud.
How I milked my neighbor's goat in 10 minutes. Hi guys, I am KH Low, and if you ever met anyone crazier than it was I consider myself fun to be with. You can actually get crazy with me. I would take up adventures simply because it was just an adventure. For reasons which I can't properly understand, I have always had a level of curiosity you don't get to see in most people you meet on a daily. Some say curiosity killed the cat. Well, for KH Low, curiously was her life wire. The very thing that kept her going. My curiosity always gave me something new to focus on and a direction in which I could channel my energy. I would swim through land or walk on water just to find answers about certain things that puzzled me, and trust me, I always had questions. My head seems to always question the reason why things were the way they were. The cause and effect of certain actions taken. This has made me learn by experience 1,000 ways things don't work. For instance, one time while I was just 3 years old, I got surprised when I closely observed that a newly wedded couple that was our next-door neighbor. I could tell her stomach of the wife was increasingly getting bigger than Mummy's own. This gave me quite a great bit of concern because Mummy was older than her and by default should have the bigger stomach. While I was still trying to put pieces together, I discovered that the size was no more as big as it was, but she now carried a child smaller than myself. I couldn't help it anymore, and so I walked up to Mummy, who seemed rather happy this woman was beating her to the belly race. "Mummy, from where did she get the baby?" I inquired. "She got it from within her," Mummy said. "Who put it within her?" I further asked. "Well, she has always had it within her, she just decided to bring it out now," Mummy replied, cleverly avoiding details that were not fit for a 5-year-old. I wasn't satisfied, and it was no new knowledge that I won't leave until my curiosity had been satisfied and my questions answered. How did she bring it out? Does she still have any more left in her? While Mummy was still figuring out a way of escape, I gave the final blow. "Can you bring out a baby for me now?" At this point, a dad who was amused and thrilled altogether by the uncommon intelligence displayed by me just like other times burst out laughing as he picked me up from the ground. "Yes, when Mummy is ready, she will bring out one," he said while passing her a naughty glance. Though my curiosity was still not satisfied yet, I had the promise of a baby which I eagerly now looked forward to, and so I let the sleeping dog lie. Children have a knack for imitating what they see others do. Well, Khlo was not your regular kid. If I wasn't imitating what I had seen, I was initiating what I had imagined. This lesson my parents learned very early, and so while great caution was taken when doing certain things while I was around, they equally paid close attention when I was on my own because I was always up to something. Fast forward to a year later and I had my 4th birthday party being celebrated. It was usually fun, and this time was no different. The colorful event had neighbors, friends, and well-wishers come over. While they sang the traditional happy birthday song, my eyes were fixed on the 4 lit candles which I was expected to blow out. And as you will rightly guess, I had questions. One of the reasons you would want to avoid my questions is because I usually paid attention to details others might pass on as insignificant. I won't say that I have a photographic memory, but I clearly remember that during last year's birthday celebration, I had just 3 wax candles to blow out. But now they were 4. One thing I find fascinating is the fact that I was never allowed to eat them. What in the world were candles doing on a cake when you are not allowed to eat them? Did they make the cake sweeter? Why were they now 4? I could have gone on a quest to get answers from Mummy and Daddy almost immediately. But it was my birthday party and they were all over the place, and I won't get the attention I needed. If I was going to get answers, I would have to find them myself, and so I began to hatch a plan. The taste of the pudding has got to be in the eating, so if you ever come around and get served something nice with candles in it, the whole credit shouldn't be given to Mum because your baby girl equally paid the cooking pot a visit. Standing in front of the mirror, I had never been more proud and excited. The holidays were over and today was resumption day. Mum and Dad would finally heave temporal sighs of relief as I'll be away from home for a few hours. I was already 16 and from all indications, I got wilder and more inquisitive with age. Mom had finally fulfilled the promise of bringing out a baby 2 times over. Keeping up with my siblings was not really going to be a difficult task. No, they already dealt with Khlo. Unlike me, my 2 siblings were just regular kids who were only intrigued by things they saw but lost interest immediately they saw something else. Yeah, they were easily distracted, but it was going to be easy keeping them on a leash. I was quite popular in school. I don't really know how I do it, but it just seemed real easy making my presence felt. One way or another, Khlo would always happen. I had no issues making friends. If you could get crazy, then we could be besties. Teachers knew me for me. Quite a few had noted that they were always glad when rounding up a lesson. I asked questions that kept them on their toes. Don't get me wrong, even though my questions could seem and sound naughty, they didn't stem from a motive to cause mischief but from a desire to learn. If I have already painted the picture of a girl who always came out of every adventure decked in glory, then please accept my apology. Curiosity, like most things, has got its pros and cons, and for a girl who was always on the go, I got into some kind of trouble every now and then. Most times, they were life-threatening, and other times, they just simply created foes. I have had to be rescued from a fire incident started by me. A friend had to be rushed to the emergency room all because she joined me in an expedition that didn't really come out as planned. In a church, at a party, in school, and everywhere Khlo has been. I have had an unfair share of being criticized more than celebrated. Whenever KHLO happened, it was really easy to see me as a kid without a proper home upbringing who was sore on the skin of everyone, especially her parents, but if I pull off a stunt that ends well. My parents were considered fortunate to have me in the family. We have had visitors come to our home at odd times. Some came to plead with my parents to keep me far from their children, others came to issue warnings to me right in front of my parents. Well, it never really bothered me the least bit. I always try to be KHLO, and there are times it's synonymous with danger and destruction or glory and fame. So when next you seem to envy me, just remember that there are always two sides to a coin. Like every other student, I did have certain subjects that easily appealed to me. One of which was biology. Each topic just gave me so many avenues for adventure. So now you can understand my excitement when the first teacher to step into the class was the biology teacher. She immediately had my attention when she announced that we were going to study the reproductive system of animals. No sooner had she said so did I find myself walking the part of a pleasurable memory lane. It all started at the end of last semester when our final topic was the human reproductive system and reproduction. I had listened with rapt attention as she explained the steps involved taken before reproduction can occur. This was really a bad time to become KHLO, but it was too late. I'm always KHLO. I then realized I was just like Mom and the neighbor. I equally had babies in me. Now it wouldn't hurt to bring out one, would it? Of course, now I know that it takes two to tango. I needed someone willing to tango. The holidays were around the corner and I didn't know if I could utilize it. A 3-day visit to Granny was all the opportunity I would get. It was actually a tradition for us to pay Granny a visit every end of the year. There we had our Thanksgiving as a family. We got to know some cousins who we'll never think about once we left. Grandma was not Granny in every sense of the word. She was a 75-year-old woman who still had the strength of a 50-year-old, and had always been an ardent advocate of morality and discipline. Arrangements were made when she turned 65 to get someone to assist her. But she vehemently opposed it. She hated to think of herself as being so vulnerable she would need a helper. A blow from arthritis at age 70 had her reconsidering her stance. This was when Dave was introduced into the scene. A grumpy 12-year-old who just sat around waiting for instructions. Not much is known about Dave's past except that he was the 5th child of a woman who had 6 children for different men. His mom lived a promiscuous life, and she took in for several men who either denied being responsible for the pregnancy or abandoned her to raise the kids alone, as some of them were already married with kids. This further led her into prostitution as a means of livelihood. She learned by experience that being a single mom barely had any advantage, as she was now plagued with a level of poverty so intense that the kids were neglected. When it became apparent that the income she generated through her trade was not going to be enough for her and the kids, she decided to initiate those old enough into one vice or the other. For the 2 girls who just became teens, she would often send them to spend the night with various men, and they would return with the proceeds by daybreak. They were quickly exposed to the lifestyle of sex and drugs. The boys were not spared either. Once they were old enough to run, she sent them out to the streets to go pickpocketing. The home quickly became an abode for criminals. While Dave turned 3 years, his mom sexually contracted a deadly disease and passed away. Now being orphaned at an early age, he was sent into the orphanage home pending when foster parents were willing to adopt him. Although the kind of lifestyle Dave experienced in his home was not really present at the orphanage was no kinder to him. The matrons placed over the children always diverted the funds and foodstuffs donated by well-meaning individuals and firms, and this caused the children to be malnourished and neglected to a great extent. The kids soon got used to the lifestyle of survival of the fittest. Bullying was a constant feature in the house, and it was no news when you heard that a kid had run away from the home. If brought back to the orphanage, the kid was made to face severe punishments just to make sure he never repeated the act. Dave ran away twice. The first time was when he was 7 years of age, and the second time was when he was about clocking 12 in 3 days. It was while my dad was at the orphanage making inquiries about the adoption process that he saw Dave being led back into the home. The look on the faces of other children suggested that Dave was in for a treatment he knew too well. There was just something about the whole scene that Daddy could relate to. Upon further inquiry about Dave, he saw so much of himself in Dave that he decided that he, Dave, fit the profile of the individual Grandma needed around. Of course, Dave would need to have some work done on him, but Dad was convinced Grandma was well suited to handle Dave. After all, she did a good job on him years back. and Dave was really no different. He was just going through the same things Dad experienced years ago. My dad was the first of 3 children, all from the same couple. He was the product of pure love between 2 couples. Unlike Dave, he knew his father and had the temporal privilege of enjoying a father's love. He was full of life until his father lost his life in a ghastly motor accident. At the age of 6, he had become fatherless. His mom tried all she could to fill up the space created by her husband. She took up multiple jobs and even turned down a couple of suitors who had proposed marriage because she felt that they might not totally love her kids. The demands of her jobs occasionally made her unavoidably absent from the life of her kids, and this began to affect them negatively. Dad soon becomes an object of ridicule in class. He was not spared the torments of bullies, and this further caused a decline in his grade. He gradually became a recluse, cutting off from the rest of the world when he still had a lot to offer. The kid who was once full of energy and positivity now battled with low self-esteem. He saw himself amounting to nothing and thought that he would die soon. A thought that he saw as a relief since it would put an end to his misery. Grandma often came home late at night and was always too tired to check up on how the day went for the kids. So it took a while before she noticed the mess she had made. She immediately began making adjustments by cutting down her work hours, visiting the kids in school twice a week, and spending more time with them at home. As soon as Dad started getting the reassurance of his mother's love, he began standing up to the bullies in school because he knew his mom would show up to his defense as she once did when she confronted a bully who regularly picked up on Dad. She reported the matter to the school authorities and the boy was suspended for a while. As time went by, Grandma rebuilt his confidence and self-esteem. She made him always seek something positive in any negative circumstance. Thanks to Grandma's resilience, Dad turned out great, and he knew she could do the same for Dave. Making our way to the front porch of Granny's house, we were greeted by the now 17-year-old Dave, who, although was far from being a fine gentleman, was now so full of life. It was no surprise. Grandma's recipe had worked just as Mom and Dad said it would. It always worked. It worked on Dad, and it helped shape him into a man very conscious of how limited time is. Although Dave was so eager to please everyone, it was the night before we left that I paid attention to him. I was actually keeping him at arm's length because there was really nothing about him that appealed to me. The house was finally crowned as uncles came with their families. This time you're alone, we had 5 babies added to the family. The rooms were filled up and the kids were made to share the same room with Dave. Deep into the night, you could hear the little babies crying in the other room, and while it kept me from falling asleep, everyone else had dozed off, or so I thought. The babies reminded me of the reproduction lessons we had had and my desire to explore. While I tried taking my mind off it, Dave sleepily crossed his hand over me, laying it on my belly. I made to brush his hand aside, but that became my undoing as it grazed the tip of my breasts. That sent a sweet tingling sensation running down my body, and I had to now move my body in a rhythmic fashion to ensure a repetition of body contact. Before long, I felt something rock-hard poking and rubbing me. In no time I found myself guiding his hands down a warm, moist, and slippery path which felt so good. I then wondered why my teacher skipped the part where you find yourself on the moon. A shout from Grandma was what it took to end a journey that had barely begun. She had fallen down while making her way to the restroom. We were all surrounding her in no time, and she had to be rushed to the clinic where she was admitted for the night, and Mom and Dave had to stay with her. By morning, she was declared all right but advised to rest a lot. Dad picked up Mom, Grandma, and Dave from the clinic before taking us back home. I was really frustrated as I had some unfinished business. Standing on the porch and waving goodbye as Daddy drove off was Dave, who I was certain couldn't wait for the next Thanksgiving. I may not have completed this expedition, but it gave me a renewed passion to seize the opportunity when next it came. Wherever it came, back to the classroom, the lesson was delivered as expected. We specifically learned about the reproduction of a goat and how it breastfed its kid. The whole class was almost thrown into a frenzy at some point when the teacher mentioned that a kid wasn't the only one who took goat milk. Humans equally did. You could literally see the look of disgust on our faces. It was very difficult putting the pieces together. If we took the same milk the goats did, can we be called goats? Why don't we have the same horn they had? Why don't we walk on all fours just as they did? Why don't we bleat the same way they did? Can we eat the grass they ate and still stay healthy? The teacher very well knew that he had some questions to answer, but he wanted to keep us anticipating the next class, so he decided not to take questions today. I've never had the patience to wait for an answer. You either give it to me now or I get it now. I wasn't going to let this pass, and you could bet on it. I needed to know if I belonged to the family of goats. Immediately I got home, I headed straight for my laptop. It was one of the tools which aided me in fact findings. I started surfing the web looking for goats and answers. After a few minutes, it became clear. Humans actually consume goat milk, but it passed through processes that made it safe for us. Wow, I was glad I wasn't a goat. Curiosity further led me into watching how this goat milk was obtained. I watched the milking process. It looked very easy, and I knew that I could do it. I knew I would do it. This time, I won't need a partner. I only need a goat. For the very first time in a long time, I almost believed I had run out of ideas. How was I going to lay my hands on a goat? Every possible means seemed to have its own hurdle. I couldn't visit the zoo just to milk a goat. I couldn't suddenly ask Mom and Dad to get me a goat as a pet. We already had 3 dogs which regularly made messes I had to clean up while fuming with rage. They would definitely know that I was up to something, and I am not keen on bringing them in on my next point of gender. The only option remaining on my list happened to be Mrs. Coker, a neighbor whom I disliked. I may be overreacting, but she always seemed more creepy and less friendly to me. Her constant smiles wouldn't make me budge on my stance. She was a 40-year-old divorcee with a daughter my age, and rather than remarry, chose to surround herself with various kinds of animals for pets. Well, I doubt she had suitors who wanted to marry her. She looked like a goat and weighed like a cow, and although she didn't have suitors, she had cows. Goats, horses, dogs, chickens, and kittens. Her home was like a mini zoo, but if I ever get to milk a goat, it was going to be hers. There were stories of her past that we were not sure were false. Rumor had it that most of the women in her family didn't have stable homes. Her grandmother was a divorcee, and so was her mum. She grew up in a home that was filled with abuse. She had watched his mother always got in an argument with her father, who ended up beating her most of the time. Her dad soon began bringing other ladies into the house just because he claimed that his wife, who nags a lot, has refused to get intimate with him since they last had an argument. It was said that rather than try to make up with her husband, her mum now decided to return the favor by equally bringing men into the home just to have sex with them. She often paid these men, who were sometimes younger than her. Her husband decided to get a divorce from her when he once walked in on her making love with a man, and they were both naked. Mrs. Coker had seen all this, and it had quite an impact on her. She saw marriage as a thing to be dreaded. She made up her mind never to get married, but at the age of 25, she saw herself in the home of a widower who had proposed to marry her after she got raped and impregnated. Not wanting to face life alone with a child by her side, she reluctantly accepted, but things didn't work out as she thought. The widower was a man who refused to bring anything to the table. He just exploited Mrs. Coker. It was when he beat her up for refusing to give him the money she didn't have that she knew that she would be better off alone with her daughter. She divorced him and decided to start rearing animals as a means of dealing with the loneliness she felt. Mrs. Coker became a farmer who randomly shared her proceeds with the neighbors on weekends. She didn't have any mouth to feed except her daughter Meg, and so, you would often see them hand in gloves, going to families to distribute eggs, milk, or some dairy produce. She was loved by all except me, and whenever I was greeted by their smiles, I returned them with a scripted grin. Parents would sometimes drop off their children with them, and they took no small delight in teaching them practical agriculture. This was the part I wanted. Practical agriculture. Practically milking a goat, but if I was going to be a student, I would need to like the teachers, or at least pretend to. Her daughter took after her in looks and size, and eventually surpassed her mom. She looked like a goat, weighed like a cow, ate like a horse, and drank like a camel. In fact, it seemed as though anything she did was done in excess. An attitude that I found really offensive. In class, she ate in excess, laughed in excess, played in excess, and fought in excess. The only thing she never had in excess was good grades. You could say she failed in excess. At one time, she seized every opportunity to get close to me, but she wasn't the kind of friend I wanted. I love people who are crazy, not stupid. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and it was clear that I had to now extend a hand of friendship if I was ever going to get near the goats. Without wasting time, I started executing my plan the next day in school. It wasn't difficult finding an opportunity, as I knew she always never did her assignments at home. She had to copy it from someone else in school. I was going to save her today. I gave her my book, which she hastily took, and that began our friendship. While she saw me as an escape route to better grades, I saw her as the path that leads to the goats. This sudden relationship progressed at a very quick pace, and she soon started coming over to our house so we could do the assignments which we were given in school. As you would rightly guess, I did the assignments, and just copied them. Before long, she became a regular visitor at our home, and although my mom and dad were very much surprised as everyone else was, they were not against the friendship as it meant we received more agricultural produce. You could call me a manipulator, but I was getting close to my goal. And besides, our relationship was mutually beneficial to everyone involved. I was helping her get good grades, and it was only fair she helped me get some good milk. Did I really like her personality? No, I didn't. Was she ever going to be more than access to milking the goats? I don't know. What happens to the relationship after I get the milk? I don't know. Time will tell. When I got to that bridge, then I would figure out how to cross it. Meg didn't show up in class on a Thursday, and word soon got out that she had taken ill. On getting home, I informed my parents about it together. We all went to visit her. It turned out that she had caught a cold, but it wasn't so serious. The doctor advised that she took out time to rest, and this meant that she had to stay away from the animals. We weren't the only ones who came visiting, but as her friend, I quickly made myself feel at home. The animals were yet to be fed that evening, and I readily offered to help Mrs. Coker feed them. My parents left without me as I was still tending to the animals while Mrs. Coker received the visitors and tended to Meg. When it was time to leave, Mrs. Coker was very grateful that I came around as she was already too busy to tend to the animals. I told her it was no big deal. I was just being there for a friend. I promised to come by every day to check up on Meg and help feed the animals. My parents were really impressed with the attitude I displayed, and they commended me for it. I eagerly anticipated my arrival at the Coker farm residence. I was greeted by the ever-smiling farm owner, who couldn't hide her excitement at my arrival. I went to check up on Meg, who was observing a bed rest just as the doctor advised. I needed to bring her up to speed on what has been going on in school before I'll feed the animals. While I was discussing with Meg, her mom interrupted us, saying that she had to go down to the pharmacy to pick up the drugs the doctor prescribed for Meg. Immediately she left, I rounded up my session with Meg and headed straight for the animals. I quickly attended to the other animals but saved the goat for last. Upon finishing with the other animals, I realized that I had a few minutes before Mrs. Coker arrived and put a stop to my escapade. This was the moment I had been waiting for, and I wasn't going to wait any longer. I quickly rushed over to the section where the goats were kept, and without much thought, I descended on the first goat I could lay my hands on. It seemed harder than I thought, as I found it difficult to get the goat to release some milk. I was doing exactly what I had seen in the video which I watched, or so I thought. I finally reached a milestone in the 10th minute when the goat released a gluey substance. But my joy was short-lived after I examined the substance, and it didn't look like the milk I had seen. Then I froze when I discovered that I was in a hurry, that I forgot to check the gender of the goat. Oh my God, this was a male goat. I was mad. Have I come all this way for nothing? Did I unwillingly enter into a relationship with the Cokers all for nothing? Did I tend to the sick, and had all her assignments done all for nothing? What was I going to do? Do I immediately start all over again? I knew it was not possible, because Mrs. Coker was probably on her way back. I had ruined my opportunity to milk a goat, and I didn't know when next it was going to come. I didn't know when next Meg would fall ill, and her mom would leave her in my care to go and get drugs. Another thought seemed better. What if I just opened up to Mrs. Coker that I would love to milk a goat? That way, I would not have to be looking over my shoulders or hoping that someone gets ill. Hey guys, what will you do if you were me? Would you continue with the friendship that you never really wanted? I would love to know your thoughts about it. Hi guys, I am Tracy. Please, make my story animated. How freelancing and working online has been pissing me off. Hi guys, I am Tracy, and I recently got into freelancing after losing my freedom. I was born into a family of 4 which were made up of my father, my mother, my brother, and me. My parents were very wealthy people who co-founded a tech company, Zenit. The company was worth an estimated amount of $300 billion and was comfortably seated as number 5 in the top 10 global tech companies. It was said that Rome was not built in a day, and neither was their company. My parents made it mandatory that every staff who worked for them in the company or at home was well acquainted with that fact. Zenit was born out of hard work, self-denial, and persistence, and they were not going to let people who lacked these qualities ruin the company. My dad had a background you would not envy. He never knew his parents because he was left at the doorstep of the orphanage home by an unknown lady. Life seemed unfair to him as the orphanage was no place to raise a proper child. However, fortune smiled on him when at the age of 2, he was adopted by the Freemans. Mr. and Mrs. Freeman had been married for 8 years without a child. They went through every medical procedure available at the time, and it was during one of those procedures that it was discovered that Mr. Freeman was sterile, and his wife, who had suffered from fibroid in the past, now had a damaged womb. The news came as a rude shock to this young couple, but they soon picked themselves up and decided to face life with every ounce of positivity. This led them to the adoption home, where they were soon enchanted by this cute little boy whom no one knew much about. All legal requirements were met, and this 2-year-old boy was taken home. A celebration was made to receive my dad, and people came to congratulate the Freemans. My dad was renamed Trevor by the Freemans, who loved him in no small way. Although the Freemans were not wealthy, they lived a comfortable life, and taking care of my dad was never a problem. Life treated my dad very fine until tragedy struck the Freeman family 3 days to his 18th birthday. The Freemans were returning from a picnic when they were robbed at gunpoint. The robbers equally made away with their life, and my dad, who was with them, sustained 2 gunshots to the chest. Luckily, he survived but had now become orphaned once again. My dad, who was now 18 years of age, couldn't go back to the orphanage, and so he began life as an independent adult. The Freemans left only enough to see him through high school, and so he had to take up several odd jobs in college just to make ends meet. It was while he worked as a cleaner in a restaurant that he met Patricia, the woman who would be his future wife. Patricia was a young, industrious woman who was getting set for college. She had parents who could fund the bills, but she wanted to gain financial independence from her parents, so she resorted to taking several jobs to generate money. She was a worker in the same restaurant as a dad, but Dad had been employed before she came seeking employment. Dad was assigned to teach them how to handle certain equipment, but it turned out she was no learner, as she had already worked 3 jobs before then. It was during this time that learned that my dad was already in the college which she was preparing to attend. This further drew them together, and they soon found themselves falling for each other. Dad was the first to make the move. He was thrilled by the fact that Mom, who had parents who could foot her college bills, still chose to work. She was different from other ladies. One time when she was cleaning the storage room, she tripped over a bucket and was headed straight for the floor. But Daddy's timely intervention saved the day. He had caught her before she could hit the floor, and while she was still searching for the words to say thank you, he quickly rewarded himself with a kiss. The kiss was all the trigger she needed, as she immediately pulled him close and started reaching for his buttons. She cared less if someone walked. Dad had lit a flame in her which needed to be put out. This was the birth of something that would last for a lifetime. Their relationship blossomed. Mummy often supported Dad with the little savings she made. While she was a freshman in college, Dad was a year ahead of her. But it was not an issue. Although they lived apart, she would sometimes spend the weekend at his place, so he could assist her with some school work. They inspired each other, but I think Mom inspired him more. She was always thinking ahead. It was in Dad's final year, after the school failed at the implementation of digitized courses, that she suggested they start up a technological firm that would offer both hardware and software solutions to individuals and firms. Although this idea had great potential, they both knew it required the kind of capital that they didn't have, but were determined to try. All the same, so while Dad graduated and sought funds, a Mom who was now in her finals drafted up the structure of the organization. Upon Mom's graduation, Daddy proposed, and 6 months later they were married on a very simple occasion. Having made their union official, they resolved all the more to make sure that they succeeded. This made them take the decision not to have children until certain things were put in place. For a company that was just in its infancy and lacked a physical location, they found it very difficult getting clients, even though the competition was very little. They made and distributed business cards that only drained the little capital at hand. They tendered business proposals that were meant to create partnerships with several institutions, only to be turned down over and over again. Their breakthrough finally came when a friend of her dad who ran a private college institution needed some supplies and installation. This marked a turning point in their career, and they have consistently worked at the development of the firm. 3 years after their first major business deal, Mom and Dad decided it was time to make babies, and upon their first trial, they had twins. My brother and I, that was all the kids they were willing to have. My brother took after my parents. He always sought independence from infancy. He would rarely allow anything done for him, even though we had staff at home who were there to attend to our needs. This greatly pleased my parents. They saw his attitude as a statement that he didn't take their efforts for granted. My mom saw much of her in him. She knew this boy could survive even without his parents' wealth and influence. I, on the other hand, gave them great concern. I was the direct opposite of my brother, and who it was that I had taken after, they couldn't tell. My parents were both hard workers who never allowed their wealth to negatively affect the way they related with people. So they couldn't understand whose gene flowed in me. I was the definition of laziness. Over time, I had perfected the art of laziness, that if you didn't want something done, just give it to me. I enjoyed the privileges I had. I was bossy to the staff around, and I loved doing my thing in my own time, which I never had because I was busy doing nothing. If I had my way, I would compel someone to spoon-feed me, bathe, and clothe me. The only relief my parents had was the knowledge that I wasn't too lazy to breathe. Yeah, it was that bad. Unlike my brother, I always exhausted my monthly allowance before the week ran out. My grades were not so bad. At least they were not the worst in class, but neither were they as good as that of my brother, who always came top of the class. At 16, we were both in our final year in high school, and our parents were throwing a party to celebrate the company's 20th anniversary. Several renowned people in the society would be there. Top politicians were among the special guests of honor. It was a week before the party that our parents informed my brother and me that we would be given the opportunity to each present a 20-minute speech before everyone present. This speech would feature which career path we had chosen, and how it would directly or indirectly influence the growth of the company. They, however, failed to inform us that the audience would be allowed to ask us questions based on what we had said. It was a day I didn't look forward to, but I knew that I wasn't ready to have my monthly allowance denied me because I let my parents down. The day finally arrived. As expected, it was colorful and everything was put in place to ensure that the event went according to plan. As expected, the high and mighty were there. The anniversary was being aired live, and so everyone was expected to be their best. Things moved smoothly until it was time for the children of the founders of the company to make their speech. We had to submit our written speeches 15 minutes before we were called up to make them so that they could be duplicated and distributed to the guests. My brother was up first. He said he had long decided to take a career path in software programming, so that way, he could work in the company, become directly involved in writing software programs which the company could sell to generate funds. As expected, there was applause from the crowd, and a guest asked what inspired him to take a path in line with the family business. We all listened as he said that he got passionate about the family business over time as he saw how dedicated my parents were towards the growth of the company. This inspired him to take steps that would prolong the legacy of the family long after my parents were gone. This response further evoked applause from the crowd. You could see my parents swelling with pride. It was now my turn to impress everyone, especially my parents. My brother had made them proud so many times, and I was prepared to make this my first. And the world who were watching would see just how great the kids of the great tech company were. I started my speech by telling them that the company which they had gathered to celebrate was not just founded as a means out of poverty, but its primary aim has always been to make humanity better, bring us closer, and then make life easier. Zenit was founded to bring a digital solution to the digital problems, both hardware and software which existed then and still does now. I made them understand that money was just a byproduct of the solution, and that's why Zenit had made so much of it even though it was never the chief aim. I further stated that my choice of career did not stem from the desire to amass wealth, but it came from the philosophy of my parents' company, which was to bring solution in every legitimate means possible to every aspect where humanity greatly suffered, which was why I would be going into politics. And although it had no direct relation to the family business, I was going to help defend the interest of citizens, thereby creating a legacy which had its roots in my parents' legacy. And whenever I am spoken of, people will agree that I was the personified legacy of my parents in the government. I marveled at the things I said, but my parents were more stunned. This was a part of me that they had never seen, thought about, or dreamt of. They didn't seem to mind the fact that I had just told the world that I wasn't going to be directly involved in their business. What mattered to them was the fact that I was going to use my life for something meaningful and productive. I never saw coming what happened next. A standing ovation from everyone almost led to my collapse. I never knew I could say what I had just said. This was my moment of glory, and I was going to bask in it. After the applause had died down, the wife of a serving senator asked a question. She wanted to know why a freelancing company was thanking me for patronizing them and hoped to do business with me again. I felt stupid. I was stupid. I had employed the services of a freelancer to help me prepare a script, and when it was delivered to me through my email, I just printed it out. I had about a week to go through it, but I was too lazy to do so, otherwise I would have noticed the message of gratitude at the bottom right of the paper. I bowed my head in shame as I walked off the platform and made straight for my room. I had embarrassed my family in front of the whole world. How my parents handled the rest of the night I could not tell, but I know that the party ended rather quickly, and on a sad note too. The next day, newspaper headlines and television channels made matters worse. It was a field day for journalists, who were paid by rival companies to spread the news that the daughter of the giant tech firm called Zenit was a scam. My parents' company temporarily lost investors at a fast pace. The company's board of trustees was made up of 6 shareholders. My dad, my mom, Mr. Jack, Mr. Kent, Mr. Roberts, and Mr. McCarthy. My dad had 20% shares, my mom had 20%, and the rest of the board members each had 15% shares. Mr. Jack had been a shareholder in the company for over a decade. He was in my dad's class back in school, and they both graduated the same year. He initially ventured into the same line of business when he saw how the company was making rapid progress. His startup company did well at the initial phase because he had the means to raise the capital needed at its inception and few human connections, which gave him little influence. However, my parents' company had already established its own presence in the market, and it soon became very clear to Mr. Jack that his company lacked what it took to make it. While realizing that his company was on the verge of collapse, he then decided to approach my parents for a merger. Offered help only when saw an opportunity to exploit. He never put his money where there was no chance of multiple returns. He has been a shareholder with the company for 5 years simply because he saw it as good business. As a gambler, he knew it was time to pull out when the company started losing investors. As for Mr. Mackenzie, he had been with the company for over 15 years. He was not just a shareholder, but he was a staff at the company who genuinely wanted the success of the company. He was one person my parents always appreciated having around because of his sincerity and integrity. He had a real estate company he co-founded with his wife, but he left her to manage it while he worked for my parents at Zenit. He was the only one who was concerned not just for the money and investors who were leaving, but for my parents' legacy too. It was his concern for the company that made him call the attention of my parents to the fact that the other investors were thinking of selling their shares to the chairman of the company's rival. Mr. Pablo founded a rival company called Apex. He was a man who was known to delve into every kind of business that brought in money, and it didn't matter how. Rumors had it that his tech company called Apex was only an umbrella that covered his dirty line of businesses that gave him the major part of his wealth. He was rumored to be into drugs, human trafficking, and every kind of illicit business you could think of. He always found a way to evade the law. He was a 3-time divorcee who was repeatedly accused of domestic violence. He had children that he couldn't account for. His hatred for my family and our company began 5 years ago when a client whom he had supplied inferior products to had he taken to court, and the client ended up seeking my dad's services. Mr. Pablo claimed that my dad was responsible for everything, and ever since he constantly sought ways to get back at us. He finally got his opportunity when I messed up, and he tried buying the shares of the major stakeholders of my father's company. So that way, he could take over our company. When my parents learned that Mr. Rob had already sold his share to Mr. Pablo, my dad quickly bought that of Mr. Kent, while my mom bought that of Mr. Jack. This quickly aborted the plan of Mr. Pablo, who would have to wait till when next I opened another window of opportunity. It was 3 weeks later, after my dad had sued the journalists who had spread the lies about my parents trying to use their kids to manipulate people into investing in the company, that they confessed to being paid by no other than the Apex chairman, Mr. Pablo. My dad wasted no time in taking him to court, and it was then all the terrible deeds he had been involved in began coming to light. Families and individuals who couldn't get justice in the past against Mr. Pablo were now coming forth to testify against him with heartbreaking evidence. There was no escaping from Mr. Pablo this time around. The judge ruled against him. He was sentenced to life in prison and made to forfeit all his assets to the government, who will use them to compensate his victims. The court equally ruled that the shares he had bought in our company will be forfeited to the company, who would then distribute it to its shareholders. There was a buzz in the whole country. The next day, newspapers carried the headlines, "The Apex Predator is gone." They labeled my family as the heroes of society, who helped the voiceless masses get justice. Some said that it was the window of opportunity that I created that led to the downfall of Mr. Pablo. This caused investors to rush back in, and they were so much that the company had to turn down hundreds of them. In the space of 2 months, the company witnesses a 300% growth. It was clear I had almost ruined their legacy. They ignored me for the period when they were trying to clear my mess while thinking about the kind of punishment I deserved. I knew an apology would do no good, as I had apologized too many times without making a change, so I patiently waited for the inevitable. My punishment came in a way I never expected. I had the staff assigned to me all withdrawn from me permanently. My allowance was off. I had to eat whatever was on the menu for that day. To crown it all, I had to take up a freelancing job in writing. The very thing I had used to embarrass the family. I was made to undergo a 2-month writing course, so I could be taught what I needed to know about writing articles, scripts, speeches, and whatever it was that I would be writing. 2 months went rather fast, and I was now ushered into a world of excruciating torture and pain. Yes, work for me was torture and pain. Since it was a freelancing job, I was made to work from home. That way, I was constantly monitored. There was just no escaping it. I could only spend the money I earned. No sooner had I begun before I discovered how difficult freelancing was, especially when you were working remotely. I had a hard time getting hired even though I joined multiple freelancing platforms. In every platform I joined, there were already professionals who had years of experience and a very attractive portfolio, so clients would always choose them over one who was a novice and just starting. It took me about 3 months before I was eventually contacted by a prospective client who backed out after stating that I lacked the needed experience to handle his project. The next prospective client, who almost awarded me his contract, became skeptical after she checked my profile and discovered that I was the infamous daughter of the owners of Zenit. It was frustrating. Really, really frustrating. I got lucky when a 14-year-old student contacted me. He wanted me to write a 10,000-word essay on a topic that I was needed to research before I could write it. I was ecstatic. I knew I had hit a gold mine. A 10,000-word essay was going to pay me just enough money to enjoy a bit of luxury. It had been almost 6 months since I last spent money the way I wanted, but after this gig, I knew things would temporarily get better. He needed it in about a week, and even though I never saw the possibility of having it ready in 2 weeks, I wasn't going to watch this money pass me by. So I told him I could have it ready then. I got mad when he told me that he was only able to pay $10. $10? What in the world would I do with $10? When I was still on a monthly allowance, I had usually spent $200 in a day. And yet it wasn't even enough. How can I now spend 7 days working just for $10? I quickly ended the conversation. I was now very frustrated. It had been a while since I last spent money on myself. I couldn't go to my brother for help as he was already forbidden from giving me money or helping me out with my work. Out of desperation, I quickly accepted an offer of $30 from a client who wanted a 20,000-word essay on global warming. He needed it in 4 days and demanded that I sent him the progress at the end of each day. I had always hated routine, but for the sake of $30, I had to keep up. I never liked being bossed around. No, I was used to giving orders. This new development was one that I wasn't going to get used to anytime soon. It took me an additional 3-day period to complete the project, but on the 7th day, I discovered that he had already requested that the platform call off the contract, which was in escrow, due to my inability to meet up on the 4th day. I had just wasted 7 days of my time, and I could not take it anymore. By my own estimation, I had suffered enough. I knew that the only way out of this was if my parents lifted the ban. My family had regained the love, respect, and admiration of the masses because the apex predator was now behind bars where he would be spending the rest of his life. And I had a part in that. I thought it was only fitting that my parents restored my lost glory. I made up my mind to speak to them about it for the first time since I began serving punishment. I hadn't bothered pleading with them when they dished out my punishment, because I knew I had messed up, and felt guilty about it. But all I felt now was frustration and more frustration, so I decided to speak to plead with my parents. I walked up to them immediately after they got back from work. I had barely begun stating my frustration when the tears rose from within me. Although you could barely hear what I was saying as my words were now mixed with tears. My mom and daddy perfectly understood the situation. But to my amazement, they just stood there smiling. They didn't show any sign of sympathy. It seemed as though they enjoyed my misery. Well, I guess they would because I had caused misery too. I was only getting served with what I deserved. When I discovered that I had not allowed them to say something yet, I quit talking but continued sobbing. By now, I had already created a scene, and the whole staff in the house just watched and enjoyed the drama. I knew that they would be glad to see me cry. After all, I had made life almost unbearable for them all. Each one of them had a tale of woe that I had scripted. Finally, my dad said that there were various reasons for their decision, and the very first was to make me understand that in life, actions would always have consequences. The ban placed on me was to make me finally appreciate those around me who helped me in one way or the other. It would finally cause me to value money, and watch how I spend it since I would only have what I had worked for. Finally, the ban would make me rise beyond laziness, and get things done for myself. It was at this point that he then said that the ban would remain in force. No more monthly allowance for me till I got into college, and no staff will be reassigned to me even after I got out of college. I fell to the ground, crying as they both walked past me. Hey guys, what would you do if you were me? What would you do when you realize that you have lost your privileges because of laziness? What steps do you think I should take to change the minds of my parents?